okay, you're going to school in the South. You know, that was crazy to me. It's like you're going down University Avenue, and that's like the main road on campus, and you got the black kids on one side and you got the white kids on one side partying. It's just like nobody mixed, and that to me that it was just like we were able, because of the sports thing,
to cross over.
It bridged a little bit more, you know, and that's the power of sports. Right. And what we do and the platforms that we have is like you win, it becomes so much bigger than rich, poor, black, white, all that stuff.
Ugly behavior at high school sports. This amid allegations of racism on the field. David Douglas football coaches say they and their players are experiencing that at away games. Going beyond the headlines, Joelle Jones is live tonight. And Joelle, I understand you spoke with one of those coaches.
I did, Liz. A proud David Douglas alum. That assistant coach tells me they represent one of the most diverse and underserved student populations. And for their athletes, football is not only a passion, but also an escape. He says it's been devastating trying to build up these young players, only for students and fans to try and tear them down.
We were just very concerned that folks aren't taking this serious. Between 2 days in Nelson, we heard King Kong, we heard the N-word, we heard monkey sounds, and then our fans were almost assaulted.
Assistant coach Marcel Frazier throwing a flag after he says David Douglas student athletes and coaches continue to face racism on and off the field. Forest Grove police say they are working to identify a man who reportedly drove up to the team's bus after their first away game, making ape sounds and gestures at the black coach staff before speeding off. Frazier says things escalated at the next JV away game against Rex Putnam when a player brought the game to a halt.
What's going on, man? What's going on? In tears, he said, they're calling me the N-word, coach.
He says another player was called a racial slur during last Thursday's JV game against Adrian Nelson High School. During Friday's varsity game against Nelson, Frazier says fans faced the brunt of the behavior as the school's principal confirms students threw cake into the away stands.
Oh, our kids are already facing enough. Just showing up to school is a freaking battle. Just finding food to eat when they go home is a freaking battle. And then you go out and you see them get subjected to racism and abuse, and you see the tears in their eyes, and it just, you know, it breaks your heart as an adult.
The Oregon School Activities Association says they are working with school administrators as they investigate what happened and hold bad actors accountable. The Forest Grove School District stating in part, racially targeted language and behaviors are abhorrent. The district thoroughly investigates and responds to each incident. The principal of Adrian Nelson writing to David Douglas, you came to our campus as guests and you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. We fell far short of that, and for that we are sincerely sorry.
So I would like the kid who used the N-word to be ejected and potentially suspended for the next game. That will tell me that there is accountability. I don't care for statements. I don't care for emails.
And Coach Frazier says that sports has long been a great equalizer, adding that equality often has happened on the field first, and to make it remain that way, he wants to see a zero-tolerance policy for racism moving forward. You can read the full statements or parts of them from the involved schools as well as the OSAA at KOIN.com. Reporting live in Portland, I'm Joelle Jones, KOIN 6 News.
This the city of Chicago.
I'm Tiara Hicks, and I'm a senior at Simeon Career Academy. When it comes to Black history, the only people I really learned about in school were Emmett Till, Martin Luther King, and Rosa Parks. Oh, and Harriet Tubman. And me being a scholar, I listen anyway. But are they really going to keep repeating the same thing? It's like when your mom keeps telling you to do the dishes. It just makes you not want to do the dishes. If I was teaching history, I'll tell you about Dr. B, Margaret Burroughs.
What shall I tell my children who are black of what it means to be a captive in this dark skin? What shall I tell my dear ones, fruit of my womb?
Dr. Burroughs was an artist and a poet in Chicago from the 1920s to her death in 2010. She was also a teacher, an organizer, and a force to be reckoned with. She started the DuSable Black History Museum in her home in 1959.
That's big. That's how much
that she cared and loved our people, that she wanted to make sure that we know our history and our contribution to civilization.
That's Cedric X. Cal, one of Dr. B's former students, and this is what I really want to tell you about, that she taught in prison for over 30 years. Who do you know who would travel 35 miles every Tuesday on public transportation to Stateville for people who aren't even her kids?
She would get on the bus, the train, and make it there faithfully. Like rain, sleet, snow, she would be there.
That's Anthony Spalding, another student. Over the past couple years, me and some other young people have been interviewing Dr. B's Stateville students here in Chicago.
How old were you when you met Dr. Burroughs?
People like Marcos Gray.
It was a few years after I had already been incarcerated at Stateville, and I was in my early 20s.
And Carl Williams.
How would you describe Dr. Burroughs as a teacher and a person?
Straightforward, humble, respectable, but she's very demanding as well.
Every week, Dr. Burroughs would give the guys assignments, like to bring back a poem or a drawing for the next class.
So when we come in, everybody sign their name on the list, like, okay, it's your turn to present this. And it would go down like an open mic sort of thing.
She tried to instill this within all of us, like, what will your legacy be? Write it down.
For some of the guys there, Dr. Burroughs was their only visitor.
We called her Mother Burroughs. She was our mother and grandmother in that space.
We came in the classroom, we hugged and kissed her, which was actually forbidden to do in prison, but they respected her enough and synced our love for her that they allowed us to do that.
She was a lioness, revolutionary, but we called her Mama.
If I was teaching history class, I say Dr. Burroughs is a strong black woman. I'll probably give it a quiet moment after I say that. Because you have to be really strong to voluntarily go to a prison. A lot of folks think prisons are full of bad people, but Dr. B had a different thought. Like, these guys need my help.
A lot of brothers become hopeless, and that is not good. So you want to let them know, man, somebody care for them.
And she would always say, invest in the beauty of who you are, because when you do that, you get to pass that on to somebody else. Somebody else gets to see it.
Out of all the advice that she gave you, what would you say was the best piece of advice?
Project your voice. It doesn't help you to not be heard.
Are you grateful that you met her?
Yes, I'm very, very grateful. There was nothing that we couldn't do based upon what she instilled in us. Even though we were in such an abysmal place, like prison, being told we would never get out and things of that nature, but she didn't see us in that way.
When she seen us, what she seen was her own sons.
It's a term she always used in one of her poems, a star in the sky of my mind. That's what she is to me.
Dr. Burroughs died when she was 95 years old, but Carl, Anthony, Marcos, and Cedric were still incarcerated then.
That'd have been nice to make it home to her, so she can see all of her students, that it's a lot of us that's out here doing real good, and I thought she would have been proud to see that.
She taught them how to express themselves. She helped them see that they deserved redemption just by showing up and caring.
I got a poem name for you. My Name Rings Redemption.
Ooh, I like that title.
Freestyle, you so good.
You thought you had me. You thought you had me on my knees, cuffed up, linked up to all those on that bluebird. But y'all didn't see the dream. Y'all didn't see the vision. Y'all didn't see me coming through this wall. Y'all thought y'all had me. But no, I've been redeemed. How I've been redeemed?
The Burroughs Legacy team is Kamaria Noble, Makai Harris, Jaquavis Swift, and Rashid Harvey. For Curious City, I'm Tiara Hicks.
Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about, I jump Jim Crow.
Jim Crow. Steller's jay, Cooper's hawk, Anna's hummingbird. All of these bird species and dozens more could get new names. That's because the American Ornithological Society has vowed to change the English names of all bird species named after people. And that plan is ruffling some feathers, as NPR's Nell Greenfield-Boyce reports.
Ever since 1886, the American Ornithological Society and its predecessor organization have maintained a list of the official English language names for birds. Scientists normally prize stability in names, but as Society President Colleen Handel told NPR last fall,
we've come to understand that there are certain names that have offensive or derogatory connotations that cause pain to people.
Take a bird that was named after a Confederate general, McCown's longspur. In 2020, as cities and towns removed Confederate statues and monuments, the society renamed this bird, calling it the thick-billed longspur,
which is a descriptive name that everyone can relate to and not feel bad about saying that name.
Around that same time, the society was petitioned by a group called Bird Names for Birds. Over 2,500 people said, look, the society needs to do much more to address the racism and colonialism that's lurking in bird names. After studying the issue, the society took action late last year, announcing that it would change all bird names under its jurisdiction that honor people. Ken Kaufman is a naturalist and fellow of the society. He supported the move.
I've seen some very persuasive arguments for just going ahead and changing all of the eponymous names rather than putting all these historical characters on trial and trying to draw the line and decide who's honorable and who isn't.
He says consider Clark's Nutcracker, named for William Clark the explorer. He kept a man named York in slavery and refused to free him.
The arguments about whether or not he deserves to have a bird named for him could get to be pretty dicey.
But then again, the idea of renaming around 150 North American birds plus more South American birds, it surprised and upset a lot of people.
The decision was put out there. There was a very strong reaction in some quarters, and so the initial decision might wind up being altered.
That's because this spring, the society got another petition signed by thousands, this one saying, consider birds case by case. Plus, the society got a letter from over 200 of its own fellows saying, hold off until there's more discussion. Poll the membership. Steve Beisinger is professor emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley, and a past president of the society.
You know, an important point here is that changing bird names sends a stronger message if the changes are restricted to offensive names rather than replacing all eponymous names.
He says bird names hold a lot of history, commemorating people like Anna Blackburn, an 18th century naturalist, John Stevens Henslow, a mentor of Charles Darwin, who was an abolitionist.
Chico Mendes, maybe that name rings a bell. He's a hero of the conservation movement in Brazil who was gunned down on his porch in front of his family because of his work trying to conserve the Amazonian rainforest.
At its annual meeting, the American Ornithological Society will discuss all this, as well as its pilot project. This project will start the process by renaming a half-dozen birds. Robert Driver is a researcher at Duke University. He pushed for changing the name of that bird that honored a Confederate general. He says the 6 birds being renamed first seem like ones that almost everyone could agree on.
People who have birds named after them that are well-documented white supremacists or grave robbers of Native American skulls and things like this.
He thinks with these birds done, the society may feel less pressure to quickly rename others. And if this process changes to considering each bird individually, he sees some benefit to having those potentially dicey debates. Nell Greenfield-Boyce, NPR News.
Why genetic annihilation?
We're going to visit London's coolest postal code. The coolest postal code. That's what the Lonely Planet travel guide calls the Hackney area of East London. Old warehouses there now house art galleries and cafes, serving oat milk lattes or whatever you want. But as with many upscale neighborhoods in the UK and beyond, someone is missing. Someone small. NPR's Lauren Freyer reports.
On the edge of an Afro-Caribbean street market in the East London area of Hackney, there's a brick and stone building overgrown with wildflowers.
This is a beautiful building. It looks Gothic, but it won't be that old.
I can tell you. It's purpose-built as a school in 1861, Gothic revival by T.E. Knightley as the architect.
Mike Cooter loves this school. His son used to go here.
It's very familiar and therefore very melancholic to see it with big security signs stapled to the fence and not hearing the sound of children in the playground.
The playground fell silent this year because this is one of 4 schools that closed this summer in Hackney alone, and 4 more may do so next year for lack of students. Louis Hodge with the Education Policy Institute says London's birth rate peaked in 2010 and has been falling ever since as the cost of housing and childcare spike.
Parents-to-be actually moving to other parts of the country, and even those that are staying might be actually just deciding to have less or potentially even no children. So London boroughs such as Westminster, Southwark, Camden, they've all experienced falls that are greater than kind of 10% over the last 5 years.
That's tens of thousands of children per year. This is also happening in Finland, in Greece, and in Rochester, New York. But London may have the worst of it. It's a banking center with high earners and a housing shortage. Brexit has restricted some immigrants who tend to have more kids. And austerity has left many UK municipalities bankrupt. Hackney has a big supply of public housing, but some of it has been privatized, even converted into Airbnbs, creating what Mike Cooter calls a doom loop.
Families move away and then they never come back and the rent spirals up and you end up having a city with no children in it.
The kids that are left here, government statistics show 1/3 of them live in poverty. That's way more than in most of Europe, but way less than in the United States. Child welfare expert Kathy Evans calls children an indicator species. That's a biology term.
If that species within that ecosystem is doing okay, then the whole ecosystem works. And if they are struggling, then that's a threat to the whole ecosystem.
A threat to teachers and school janitors who get laid off, and a threat to free or subsidized nursery school, without which working class folks can't live here. And thus a threat to the economic diversity of this city.
You have 2 child seats, space for groceries and luggage, and...
Yeah, I used to have a basket, but it fell off, so...
Yulia Kesselman locks up her cargo bike outside her daughter's preschool. If the borough goes ahead with plans to cancel 1/4 of slots earmarked for lower-income families like hers, Kesselman says she may have to leave the neighborhood she loves.
Well, if you can't pay the bills, you can't pay the bills, right?
She and other parents are suing the Hackney Council to try to force it to keep 2 preschools open despite declining enrollment. The UK's new centre-left government has pledged to build more housing and make it more affordable. One of the goals is to make this sound a little more common in central London. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, Hackney.
Why genetic annihilation?
A growing number of Canadians in their 20s and 30s are delaying parenthood or choosing not to have kids at all. And for a second year in a row, Canada's fertility rate is at an all-time low. According to Statistics Canada, there's now only 1.26 children being born for every woman, which puts us in a small club of countries with very low birth rates, places like Italy, Japan, and South Korea, which have faced prolonged demographic declines. While Canada's population continues to grow thanks to a 50-year high in immigration, economists are warning that this dynamic presents a unique set of challenges. Here to talk about those challenges and how we might address them is Armine Yalnizyan. She's a Canadian economist and columnist at the Toronto Star, also the Atkinson Fellow on the Future of Workers. Armine, good morning.
Good morning, Matt.
What do we know about why the Canadian fertility rate continues to decline?
It's declining for the same reasons it's declining all over the world. More women are working harder to help their households meet costs. This is about a 40-year phenomenon. So women aren't quite as significant workers in the labor market as men, but getting very close to it. About 50% of the employed workforce is female. And the other thing that has happened since the pandemic is housing costs have soared, and it is very difficult to have a family formation where you could afford both childcare and mortgages, but even rents are out of reach. So with these costs rising and women deferring having children for other reasons that are also economic in nature, and with very poor leave provisions and childcare provisions, access to affordable childcare provisions, people are just choosing to take a pass on the opportunity to have children.
What does this mean for a country like Canada? It was interesting. The OECD put out a report not so long ago, and it said declining fertility rates put the prosperity of future generations at risk. That sounds serious.
Yeah, I mean, we've probably been talking about the debt that we're passing on to our kids that has been financial and governmental in nature. This is the real debt. And it is being handed off to a whole new generation of people that are having a lot of difficulty just doing the things that being human should be, because we're not supporting each other enough. But I have to say that even in nations where these policies are really generous, we're seeing falling fertility rates. It's a social experiment that is playing out right now, and it's happening all over the world. And I'm not sure it's a terrible thing, but it is certainly going to be a challenging thing, and it's going to upend a logic that we have had in the economy, which is that we have surplus labor, and that has been the case for 40 years. We're now moving into a prolonged period of time when workers are actually going to be very valuable resources, because you can't put money to work without workers.
One of the things that report from the OECD said is that the shrinking working populations could lead to aging societies that place significant social and economic pressures on governments, notably to increase expenditures on pension and health services. So for our economy, tell me a bit more about this. What do you see as the impact of this?
Oh, yeah, we're going to be spending more on the care economy. When you've got the smallest working age cohort we've had in 60 years, and actually turning around and saying more of these people are going to need more help. Did you know the fastest growing element of the population is those aged 80 years of age and older? Not all of them need care, but a growing number of a growing number will need care. And so, we've got about 7 million people that are currently aged 50 to 65. They're going to, in the next 15 years, they're going to age into the category of being a senior. Most seniors don't work. Some do, but they don't work when they're 80, by and large. So the math doesn't work. We're going to need more immigration, but and this is happening in countries throughout the global north. Wherever there was a baby boom after the Second World War, this is the story that's playing out as the boomers age out. And yes, we have more immigration, but that is causing another cascade of political problems, as we're seeing right now.
I was going to say the government
really
has
fractious times ahead politically and difficult times economically coming up.
No, I was going to say that the government, in this country, you're seeing the political impacts of it right now. We're dialing down the numbers of temporary foreign workers. There is great political pressure to do that, in part because of housing issues and other issues that are raised. What do you make of the gaps in the economy that might create if we are going to be facing those pressures because of a declining birth rate?
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult for us to get our heads around it. Look, as I said before, we have had 40 years of effectively labor surpluses. People's consciousness don't turn around in a matter of a few years. And we had this extraordinary event of closing an economy and then reopening it, while the backdrop was this tightening labor market because of accelerating retirements. And yes, we were taking in more temporary foreign workers, 3 times as many as the immigrants we brought in. So this is a very weird way to build the economy and the society of the future on the backs of the permanently temporary. Yes, we are walking that back, but it's mostly performance art right now. We are still super reliant on the permanently temporary. And so we've got some very heavy duty kind of ethical and meta, what is society for? What is the economy for? Questions to grapple with, because the last 40 years are not predictors of the next 40 years, and we are in uncharted waters.
Elon Musk says that birth declines are one of the biggest risks to civilization. He himself has at least 11 children. He says that, he's one of the people who supports this idea of being a pronatalist. We should all have lots of kids, and that will help save the economy. What do you make of that?
Well, you can't have lots of kids without having very generous supports. You can't have lots of kids without having affordable housing so that everybody doesn't have to work to live per household. We've gone from one person in the household being the major bread earner to a minimum of two to get anywhere close to a comfortable standard of living. And I'm not talking about affluent. I'm just talking not going hungry and not worrying about where you're going to live next. And, you know, it's terrific to be a natalist, but even in those places where countries do provide generous parental leave policies, do provide generous supports so that the working age population isn't spending all of its time providing unpaid care for those who are too young, too old, and too sick to work. Even in those countries, we're seeing birth rates fall. And I think it's got something to do with the fact that we're asking women to be just like men, but we don't want them to be just like men. We're asking them to be just like men in the economy, but we want them to keep doing what they've always been doing elsewise. And it's just, the math doesn't work. The most precious resource we have is time. And we have not figured out yet how to allocate it between the things that drive the economy and the things we need to do as humans.
So people have, any number of reasons when they decide whether or not they're going to have kids, whether they're going to have a family, whether they're going to have more than one child. What is it, just finally, I guess, you see these programs, baby bonuses and what have you, but there is also a push for greater childcare, more affordable housing, etc. What would move the needle, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure we need to move the needle. What we need to do is treat people as if they're important. Like when you've got the smallest working age cohort you've seen in 60 years, but less than half the pace of economic growth as a background, you're asking this smallest working age cohort to pay the bills for all the care that's needed, plus do more unpaid care. We're going to have to ask ourselves, how do we wish to help these people so that our economies don't shrink, much less grow? And I'm not sure that the child part of it, like I want to have grandchildren. I want my kids to feel like they have kids. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not sure that this unbelievable focus on having women making more babies is the right strategy in an era where the richest countries in the world are dealing with shrinking labor forces and more antipathy towards bringing in newcomers who are not like the original, the native residents. And I say that with air quotes because I'm sure the indigenous population listening are kind of rolling their eyes. My point here is that we need to do better by one another, and we have to start treating each other as the precious resource we are, which is unlike money. And we've been chasing money, not people, for the last 40 years. It's going to take a while to change our minds about what is valuable.
That's a philosophical way to end. Armine, thank you very much.
My great pleasure to be with you. Thanks.
Since you're my special friend, come closer for a special treat. I'm going to let you touch me in a special place.
It is never okay to touch someone else's private parts. Your mom and dad will tell you so.
Snapchat is a super popular social media app for teenagers, and because of that, it also attracts a lot of bad actors. Now, unsealed internal documents show that employees have been raising alarms about this problem for years. NPR's Derek Kerr reports, and a warning, this story contains information about child sexual abuse.
New Mexico's Attorney General Raul Torres had a hunch. He suspected that sexual predators were using Snapchat to groom kids, so he dispatched a team of agents to pose as teenagers on the app. He says he had no idea how bad it was.
I did not expect to see the volume and the level of aggressiveness that we have seen from these undercover operations.
His agents found examples of child exploitation and drugs and weapons being sold to youth. He says it was a stark example of the black market operating out in the open.
It surprised me, frankly, how quickly predators had migrated from those dark and sort of hard to find corners of the internet onto mainstream social media platforms.
Torres filed a lawsuit against Snapchat last month, alleging the app's design makes it easy for predators to approach children. He has a similar case against Facebook and Instagram parent Meta. In the Snapchat case, unsealed documents show employees were alarmed about the extent of the problem.
Snap had numerous individuals inside the company raising red flags about potential harm.
An internal email shows the company received around 10,000 reports of sextortion per month. Employees pointed to one account that had 75 complaints against it, and it wasn't taken down. Internally, Snapchat said that addressing child grooming would create privacy issues and be too expensive. Earlier this year, Illinois Senator Dick Durbin grilled social media executives on the Hill, and he singled out Snapchat.
As early as 2017, law enforcement identified Snapchat as the pedophile's go-to sexual exploitation tool.
Durbin described a 12-year-old girl who was groomed by a sexual predator for more than 2 years. Here's CEO Evan Spiegel responding.
Senator, that behavior is disgusting and reprehensible.
Spiegel said the app has tools for reporting inappropriate behavior, and the company's work with law enforcement has led to more than 1,000 arrests. A Snapchat spokesperson didn't directly address the allegations in the New Mexico lawsuit, but told NPR, quote, "It pains us when bad actors abuse our service." Raul Torres says the company needs to do more. Dara Kerr, NPR News.
Privacy's been dead for 30 years because we can't risk it. Only privacy that's left is the inside of your head, and maybe that's enough.
Before our next story tonight, let me ask you a question. Do you use an app to meditate? What about an app to increase your focus? Or do you wear a device like a smartwatch or a headset to sleep better or to reduce stress? Actually, it doesn't really matter what tool you use and why. If you have ever let technology inside your mind, this story is for you. You see, since the beginning of time, our innermost thoughts have been our own. No one can listen to them. And we take this for granted. But our thoughts may not be private for much longer thanks to technology, which is growing by leaps and bounds. There are brain apps, devices, and implants. They all promise to help us. So we sign up. And what happens next is this. These products monitor our brains. They analyze brainwave signals. They record brain data. They can encode virtually everything that goes on in our minds, our thoughts, our feelings, even our intentions and desires. And what happens to this data? Is it really used for the better? What if it is used for the worse? No one is sure. But if you live in the home of the Hollywood sign, one thing is certain. Now your brain can lawyer up. California has passed a new law. It aims to protect people's brain data, in other words, neural data. It will receive the same protections as other sensitive data. Basically biometric information like facial images, DNA, and fingerprints. Thanks to this new law, users can limit the data that neurotech companies collect from them. And they can stop these companies from sharing the data with third parties. Experts are welcoming this law. After all, California is among the rare few taking brain privacy seriously. Earlier this year, Colorado passed a similar legislation. It was a first for the U.S. What about the rest of the world? In 2021, Chile became the first country to protect neuro data. Mental integrity was added to their constitution. It was a groundbreaking move. Last year, a Brazilian state passed a law to protect brain privacy rights. Some countries have made proposals, including Mexico, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Argentina. They want to enshrine the right to mental privacy. So the examples are few and far between, and progress is slow. Meanwhile, tech is moving at breakneck speed. You have startups helping people control Alexa with their minds. You have billionaires funding brain implants. Look at Elon Musk's Neuralink. Do you know their big mission? To let people share thoughts telepathically. It's the stuff of superhero movies. Then there is non-invasive brain technology. Meta and Snapchat are working on it. Apple is patenting a futuristic AirPod that can scan your brain activity through your ears. Scientists have also built AI brain decoders to translate unspoken thoughts into text. This is enough to make your head spin. And don't get us wrong, neurotech is very fascinating. It can be helpful, even life-changing, but the question still remains, who is regulating this technology? All kinds of companies are building giant treasure troves of data. They're mining through billions of brain waves, and according to studies, many of them are selling this data. It's like the wild, wild west. Why? Because neurotechnology may help our health. But these products do not always qualify as medical devices, so they don't have to follow health rules. And there aren't enough tech innovation rules either. Look at social media, for instance. These giants are collecting our data, all kinds of data, and they're also reportedly selling it. But our policies are still playing catch-up with them, even though this technology is about 2 decades old. So if we can't even manage social media, how are we planning to handle something as advanced as neurotechnology? It's a question that we have to answer. Because with unregulated neurotech, much like our thoughts, our worst fears may not stay in our heads. They could be our reality.
Medical apartheid. The dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present.
9 years ago, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report, and among the 94 calls to action, several were dedicated to improving Indigenous health. The TRC suggested provinces release annual progress reports on a number of health markers, including life expectancy. Now, not every province has followed through, but 2 provinces, British Columbia and Alberta, have done so recently. When BC released its data, one of my next guests described the findings as gut-wrenching. Between 2017 and 2021, life expectancy for First Nations people in British Columbia dropped by more than 6 years. In Alberta, it was a 7-year drop. In 2015, a First Nations man could expect to live to be 67. By 2021, his life expectancy was 60 years. To talk about those numbers and what's behind them, I'm joined by 3 Indigenous health leaders. Dr. Danielle Ben-Smith is BC's Deputy Provincial Health Officer for Indigenous Health. Tanya Dick is a registered nurse and Indigenous nursing lead at the University of British Columbia. She's also Director of Quality, Cultural Safety, and Humility at the Vancouver Island Health Authority. And Dr. Esther Tailfeathers is a family physician on the Blood Tribe Reserve and a former medical lead at Alberta Health Services Indigenous Wellness Corps. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Dr. Danielle Ben-Smith, that term gut-wrenching, those are your words in talking about that drop in life expectancy. Can you tell me a bit more about why you use that phrase?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I use those words gut-wrenching is because I think it's quite plain to see from the data that that's just an absolutely tragic decline in life expectancy. And I think for a lot of my settler friends and colleagues, they don't necessarily appreciate the acuity and the urgency and what that means for us and our families. And so when I first saw that table and it came across my desk before we even published the report, the first thought that came to my mind was looking at the time frame. So that data, as you mentioned, was collected from 2017 to 2022, or 2021 rather. In my own family, if I look at 2017 to 2023, we lost 8 family members. So my Auntie Helene died. She was in her early 60s. My brother Jason died. He was in his early 50s. And I lost 6 cousins. So for us, although people can look at that and see data and numbers, those are our loved ones. Those are members of our family that we love and care about who are no longer sitting at our table.
I'm sorry for what you and your family have gone through. And we'll talk about some specifics, but Dr. Esther Tailfeathers, the data is similar in Alberta. And I wonder from your perspective, numbers are numbers, but to Danielle Ben-Smith's point, there are people behind those numbers. What story do the numbers in your province tell you about the state of healthcare for First Nations people in Alberta?
Well, thank you, Danielle, as well for what you've said. But I see it as a physician on a daily basis, and I'm seeing patients, young patients, being lost almost 2 to 3 a week. Most of them not here on the blood reserve because we have developed a continuum of care where we go all the way from clinics which offer OAT, and also we have a number of places where people have been taught about harm reduction. So we have naloxone available in many places on our reserve. And we've developed a whole continuum of care, but where we're seeing our people dying is in the cities, in Lethbridge, Calgary, and Edmonton. And that's because the cities are ill-equipped for the drug crisis that we're seeing. And what's happening in Alberta, according to the data that we've seen on the latest report, is that in 2019, there's an abrupt change. If you take a look at the data, you'll see that there's a parallel in mortality between non-Indigenous and Indigenous people until 2019. And that is when the province of Alberta started to cut back on harm reduction resources, and in the city of Lethbridge actually shut down the safe consumption site. And that's where we see the life expectancy of Indigenous people in this province start to really change, because the death rate in this province for Indigenous people is 7 times more than non-Indigenous due to drug poisoning.
Dr. Danielle Ben-Smith, broadly from your perspective, what's going on? What would lead to such a significant decline?
And I think that this is one of the areas that is really, really tricky. And I appreciate that we are focusing on the toxic drug crisis, because that is absolutely one of the main drivers of these steep drops that we've seen in life expectancy. But we cannot forget that there was a disparity that existed before this, this significant drop, and we continue to burden or carry the burden of disproportionate impacts of chronic disease and cancer and injuries. We've heard time and again that truth comes before reconciliation. And yet I think one of the hardest truths for us to confront is the reality that ideology of white supremacy that was so pervasive at the time of the founding of this country persists in systems and structures. And that language is really hard for people to hear. It's triggering in many ways. And yet we see this data. We see really on any indicator that we choose to count, whether it's education, whether it's housing, whether it's leadership. We see that non-Indigenous people are outperforming Indigenous people. And so the one way that we can make meaning of these disparities is to think, oh, well, there must be something inherent. And I'll use the indicator of leadership, actually. There must be something inherent about settlers that make them more suited to lead, better leaders, more capable somehow. But again, it's 2024 and we reject that notion. Very few people hold that as a core value or belief. And so in order to make meaning and make sense of this data that's right there in front of us that we see across all these different indicators, we need to recognize and realize the truth that this ideological bedrock of white supremacy continues to be so insidiously embedded in our systems, in our structures, in our policies, and our practices that it continues to confer an unearned advantage on settler folks and unearned disadvantage on Indigenous peoples. And so I think that really is the root cause.
Tanya Dick, you've been listening in. How do the stories that you've heard, how are they reflected in your community of Alert Bay, which is up the coast on Vancouver Island?
Yeah, thank you. Really echo Dr. Ben-Smith and Dr. Taylor Feather's personal stories. We've had probably in that timeline as well directly lost 6 people in my life to the toxic drugs, but it's getting closer and closer to, I'm from a really kind of remote and isolated community, and when these deaths are starting to happen in our communities, we know it's not, it's kind of coming in from those urban settings, and we're hearing stories of our loved ones dying away from home, and in the last year, we've had 2 literally happened, died on our reserve. And as it stands, our communities are under-resourced as it is, and we really rely on nursing services in our remote communities. They're general community nurses, they're well babies, immunizations, kind of basic chronic disease management, and not a lot of focus and expertise to deal with trauma, all of the issues that come with addictions, mental health and addictions, and it ends up burning out our nurses. And we have such a huge revolving door, like nurses just cannot, it's not sustainable for themselves personally and professionally because the needs are so high and so complex. Now we can go months without a nurse in our community.
Which is only going to lead to further problems down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dr. Ben Smith, you said that the losses that you were talking about are, these are your words, a threat to our cultural community. What do you mean by that?
When I think about my family and our experience, we're Etchodene. We are big animal people. This is through my father's line from Fort Nelson. There are probably less than 1,000 Etchodene left on the planet. We've got a handful of fluent speakers left. We need every single member of our nation to be vibrant and healthy and self-determining. We have sacred responsibilities that we have. And so every single member of our nation has an important role to play, has gifts that they've received from the Creator to keep us going and to survive the genocide that's happened since contact. And so the threat, thank you for bringing those words back, the threat to our existence, and I'm not even, trying to be overly dramatic, but when we just look at the numbers, when there's just such small communities, and our community is not unique. There's many other villages around what we call BC that are in a similar situation to us, that are the very last, have very few language speakers left.
Well, Dr. Esther Tailfeathers, from your perspective, what is one thing, if you could choose one priority, what would it be to change what we've been talking about?
It would be to genuinely include Indigenous leadership and voices at the tables of decision makers. And I think that the TRC was very well thought out. The calls to action were very well thought out by many, many voices. So the things that we need to improve upon through those are the number of Indigenous healthcare providers who are able to go and help Indigenous people in the communities, the content and curriculum of, let's say, medical school, nursing school, and all of the healthcare provider institutions, engagement with Indigenous people in the learning process so that people learn how to develop relationships and are not afraid to reach out and develop relationships with Indigenous people. And in that relationship building, we will see a change in how our people are treated in the medical institutions. So I think that following the calls to action is probably the best thing that we can do, because those were all well thought out.
Tanya, it's not just in the decision-making spaces where this is important. The TRC also highlighted the need to ensure that Indigenous patients feel safe in the healthcare system. This is something that we have spoken about extensively, and there are stories from people across this country who have not felt safe. You have seen this firsthand in your own family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's difficult when we talk about getting to the table to make decisions about creating programs and systems without us at the table as Indigenous, with that Indigenous lens. We end up creating systems and we finally get somebody into treatment or detox or somewhere, and the experience for them doesn't have that Indigenous lens. It's culturally unsafe. That kind of racism and discrimination that In Plain Sight has indicated and proven that saturates our system today. They end up leaving the treatment center. They end up leaving the experience that they're in, or they're not getting what they need to be able to pull themselves out of the dark hole that they're in. And that's all around cultural safety and humility and that racism and discrimination.
What happened with, if you don't mind me asking, with your Aunt Debbie?
Oh, yeah. My Aunt Deb, this is my mother's sister. They're all survivors of residential school. She's struggled, but able to function, high functioning, issues with alcohol. And, my mom coming out of residential school and a registered nurse as well was really kind of driven to influence change and advocate for Indigenous health. So I spent a lot of time with my Auntie Deb, and she really was the second mother in my life. And she helped raise me, and had fallen in the bathroom, hit her head somewhere on the bathtub or something, and had a pretty significant brain injury, a brain bleed. And when she was presented to emerge that morning and throughout that next morning and afternoon and evening, she progressively got worse. And every single person the hands that she went through, I think we counted 17 through the inquest, of registered nurses, physicians, ambulance, RCMP, MOAs, People on the street, every single one of them, when they testified, assumed that she was just another drunk Indian. She was under the influence. She needed to sleep it off, and she never received the care and proper assessment. And she actually died as a result of that head injury. And it was pretty traumatizing for us. And it's still really raw, and it's still it's a big reason why I do the work that I do today.
I'm sorry. In many ways, as you said, when you think about the work that you're doing, it speaks to that title, Director of Quality and Cultural Safety. Those, I think, are self-explanatory. But what does humility in the context of that mean? What could humility have done for Aunt Deb?
I think with humility, when we're looking to those providing services, it's really having the capacity and ability to put aside your own views of the world. And this isn't about you and how you see the world and how you fit in the world and how the world should be for you. This is about somebody else's world, and what does that look like for them, and what are their needs, and how can I best insert myself and provide services in a way that's going to affect their day-to-day world. And I think that's the crux of it when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, when we're actually working with trying to teach cultural safety and humility throughout our healthcare system and our health authorities. It's that humility piece is really, this is not about you. Put that aside and realize that we're public servants and we're providing services to people in their world.
Just before I let you go, I mean, you came into this profession to make a difference. And I wonder, in the face of the gut-wrenching news that we started with, what keeps you going in the work that you do? Danielle Ben-Smith.
What keeps me going? My grandmothers, who are both passed now, I know that they're walking with me alongside my aunties and other ancestors, and my kids. My beautiful, beautiful kids who, I think about Orange Shirt Day, National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. That was not something that I could conceive of when I was in school. And yet my kids go to school and they're in a sea of orange. We walk around. We live on Lekwungen in Victoria. And that is so heartening to me to see this visible demonstration that settlers are walking alongside us. They want to be making things right. And so that is absolutely what keeps me going, is knowing that we all want to be doing this work together. We don't know exactly how, but we can figure that out. So those are the things that keep me going.
Dr.
Thanks,
Esther
Matt.
Tailfeathers, for you, I mean, the work is hard and the data is discouraging. What keeps you going and plugging away at this?
I think at the end of the day, the joy that my patients and my people bring to me, I just love my community and I love the people here. So the stories of resilience and strength are what keep me going, because I know our people are going to get through this epidemic as they did with smallpox and everything else. I know we can do this, and I just love the strength in my community.
Tanya Dick, last word to you.
Yeah, just, of course, my nephews, grandnephews, the children. Really, the pocket full of champions throughout our system, particularly in the nursing, in the School of Nursing with UBC, with the BC Nurses Union, really committed to trying to find their humility and find a way forward to be a part of the solution. I think nurses are such a large health human resource, and they take up the bulk of the numbers within the system. So naturally, I see them as part of the problem when we look at in plain sight. So how do we turn that around? And I get such wind in my sails when people will sit down and say, okay, let's figure this out. And there are so many allies out there. There needs to be a lot more, and we need to mobilize, and we need to organize, and we need to continue talking to each other about this.
But you feel that wind in your sails?
I do, not every single day. It's definitely uphill, but it's making a big difference for me in my day-to-day to have somebody who genuinely sits down and wants to be a part of the solution, because that's what we need. We can't fix this as Indigenous people. You need to fix it as non-Indigenous and as allies, and we need to stand together and support us in this journey.
Thank you all for the work that you're doing and for talking to us about it. It is important, and I'm glad to have the chance to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In Virginia, the VA is facing a new civil rights case regarding one of its on-grounds mentorship programs. Today, the Equal Protection Project filed a complaint arguing that UVA is discriminating on the basis of race. Kate Nectarline is live in the newsroom to break down the document and UVA's response. It's our top story at 5.
Steve, the BIPOC Alumni Student Mentoring Program provides dozens of UVA students with individualized guidance from alumni educators. One nonprofit says the program excludes people based on race and is asking the federal government to investigate it.
We're not seeking money for ourselves. We're not seeking legal fees for ourselves. We're seeking to change discriminatory behavior.
William Jacobson is the founder of the Equal Protection Project. He says UVA's mentoring program for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC for short, violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Jacobson says the university has also violated the 14th Amendment. Both prohibit discrimination on the basis of race.
Just as it would be a violation of the university's rules to have a whites-only mentoring program, it's a violation of the rules to have a non-whites-only mentoring program. The university needs to be race neutral in its educational and related programming.
The mentoring program, now in its inaugural year, is a resource available for some students at the School of Education and Human Development. UVA's webpage says its goal is to improve BIPOC undergraduates program experiences, career opportunities, and retention.
Because they receive federal funding, the university has to comply with Title VI. They also have to comply with the constitutional requirement.
This complaint leans on the recent Students for Fair Admissions case when the United States Supreme Court ruled that the consideration of race in college admissions violates the Constitution. Jacobson is now asking the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights to investigate what he says is UVA's failure to comply with the law.
Our hope is that the University of Virginia senior administration will look at this and recognize that it's indefensible and not want to fight a losing battle, and therefore will look at it and change the behavior and open the program up.
I reached out to UVA for comment. They said they have not yet received the complaint and will examine it when or if they do. Live in the newsroom, Kate Nectarline, 29 News at 5.
I want to be a cop. Tell me about Street Cop and how you got on the story and the alleged problems with what the company teaches cops.
Street Cop is was founded in New Jersey in 2012 by a cop named Dennis Benigno. He was part of a North Jersey Municipal Police Department. He had a troubled past. He's been sued. He was in trouble with internal affairs, but his company was thriving. He was offering continuing education classes all over the country. At one point, Benigno claimed that he trained up to 30,000 police officers a year with continuing education. So I read the report issued by the New Jersey State Controller. They did an investigation into a street cop conference in Atlantic City, where some 240 New Jersey cops went. But cops from all over the country, from 47 states attended. Police from Kansas had attended. I wanted to know how many, so I did an open records request to every law enforcement agency in Johnson County, Jackson County, and Wyandotte County. Found out that 16 agencies, mostly in Jackson County, sent 68 officers to street cop training, not in Atlantic City, but they did it all over the country. Cost taxpayers of $19,000 in Johnson and Wyandotte counties. Some 18 agencies sent cops to street cop training, but it ballooned to 224 officers at a cost of $54,000. What they taught at the training, according to the New Jersey State Controller investigation, was pretty much everything you would not want a police officer to learn. There were numerous examples of misogynistic comments, homophobic comments, anti-Muslim comments. Here's just one example from the Atlantic City conference that I pulled from a video from the Controller's report.
There's an approach. You don't walk up and say, "Hi, what's your name? How old are you?" Yeah, there is like a little bit of a finesse. You gotta be a fucking gigolo.
Carlos, that's a guy named Sean Pardazzi. He was a Louisiana deputy sheriff who was charged last year with firing at a fleeing car and live streaming the whole thing on Facebook.
Investigators were particularly harsh, you say, on some of the car stop tactics being taught.
Yeah, Benigno came up with something that he calls reasonable suspicion factor checklist. To be able to question somebody at a traffic stop, you have to have reasonable suspicion. You can't, there's no gut feeling in police work. But this reasonable suspicion checklist included things like, well, if a car is driving past you and you can see that the people in the car are whispering to each other, well, that's suspicious. Benigno doesn't say how you would know if you're in your car and somebody else is in another car, how they are whispering. How would you know that? One of the other things that I discovered was Benigno is not somebody who believes in traffic enforcement for traffic enforcement's sake. Here's a cut from a podcast that he did a couple of years ago.
Like, if you're concerned about people going 20 over the speed limit, great. But you're not going to find criminals focusing on the bull like that. They don't go hand in hand. There's one or the other. You're either going to be a ticket dork or you're going to be a cop.
Now, you also discovered that in addition to Street Cop, there are 50 to 100 other private companies selling continuing education classes to police.
Yeah, it's a wild west out there for continuing education for cops. For example, in Kansas, you have to have 40 hours of continuing education every year. In Missouri, it's only 24. In Kansas, it's up to whoever the head of your agency is about what is appropriate training. There are 390 police agencies in Kansas, which means that there are 390 perhaps different ways of thinking about continuing education.
When you're a cop, you can shoot a motherfucker by the trailer park. Plenty evidence should eventually raise your sharp. Then turn around and taste a perp, verbalizing perp, I'm a cop.
Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson. Also with us, David Henderson, civil rights attorney and former prosecutor. Priscilla, what else do we know about this mixed verdict?
Yeah, so that verdict came after 19 days of trial where this jury heard from 28 witnesses. They spent more than 6 hours deliberating, and ultimately this is what they came back with, finding all three of those former officers guilty of witness tampering for some of the behavior that happened after this brutal incident where they gave misleading statements to their supervisors, to paramedics, and that kind of thing. But notably, only one of those former officers, Demetrius Haley, was found guilty of engaging in any sort of conduct that that led to bodily injury. And that was a lesser charge. That was not the initial charge that prosecutors were going after. But notably, this jury did not find that those other two officers engaged in that behavior, only finding them guilty on the witness tampering. But nonetheless, the family of Tyree Nichols walked out of that courtroom yesterday saying that this was a victory. I want to play a little bit of what his mother had to say.
All of them have been convicted of something, and they're all going to jail. That's how I feel. This has been a long journey for our family. I'm actually in shock right now because I still can't believe all this stuff is going on. But we're happy that they all have been convicted and they have been arrested.
And those three men were taken into custody yesterday. They are expected to have a full sentencing hearing in January. And of course, Attorney Ben Crump, who represents the family, saying that this is only the first step of justice, but there is still the state trial that is ahead. And that is where they are going to be charged with the crime of murder, kidnapping, among others. Jose?
Thanks. And David, all three officers acquitted of these more serious charges, violating his civil rights by causing his death. What do you make of that?
Well, Jose, ultimately, you have to call it progress, but it's impossible to call it justice. The reason I say you have to call it progress is because in comparable cases, albeit in different jurisdictions, Ronald Green comes to mind first. A black motorist is pulled out of his car by police, beaten to death, and there's been no criminal justice for the officers who did it whatsoever. However, you have the right to be free from unreasonable force during a police stop. And what's more unreasonable than beating someone to death? The ultimate gist of this verdict is the jury saying, hey, we're going to charge you with a crime for covering up what you did, but we're not going to charge you the crime for doing what you did, and that's killing Tyree Nichols. One officer is charged, was convicted for causing bodily injury, but given that they killed him, it's hard to imagine that. Now, someone could say, well, look, David, the jury heard all this, and they ultimately decided to provide a mixed verdict, but here's what you have to look at. Officer Martin, prior to the trial, chose to plead to 40 years because he knew what the facts were. And these men are now facing less than half that amount of time if they get the maximum. That puts in perspective what the real gist of this verdict is.
And so, David, where does this go next? I mean, it goes to the state court. What can we expect there?
It's going to go to the state court next. I think prosecutors, sometimes what prosecutors like to do is they will say, look, the the charge that carried the biggest potential sentence, that's been resolved now. We're going to entertain the likelihood of allowing them to reach plea agreements that are consistent with whatever they get sentenced to in that court. But it's going to be really hard to do that when you already have one officer that you pled to 40 years before the trial. I think they're forced to try this because they're looking at a range of 15 to 60 years on second-degree murder there in Tennessee. But those prosecutors will face the same basic uphill battle that they did in federal court.
Priscilla Thompson and David Henderson, thank you both so much.
The Turner Diaries sold over 500,000 copies. Who do you think is buying it? Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber, Wei Page, who shut up the Sikh temple, Larry Ford, developing typhoid and cholera, William Carr with the cyanide bomb, anthrax, ricin, botulism, C4, IEDs. I could go on like this for hours, and all of them are white supremacists.
Late last month, a water plant in Arkansas City, Kansas, switched its facility to manual operations after detecting what it called a, quote, cybersecurity issue. The incident follows multiple cyber attacks on water facilities across the country, and now the Biden administration is working on a new attempt to put in place cybersecurity standards for water systems after earlier efforts were met with pushback. Here to tell us more is James Rundle, a reporter for WSJ Pro Cybersecurity. So James, tell us more about this event in Arkansas City. What do we know?
Not very much, frankly. So there was a cyber incident at the city of Arkansas, which is in Kansas, water treatment facility, and it forced the plant to go into manual operations, meaning they disconnected the systems and everything had to be done by hand out of an abundance of caution. The city manager said that the drinking supply is safe. Nothing else is affected, but it's another warning shot across the bow for the water sector in general, which has been the target of attacks quite frequently over the last few years.
This isn't the first kind of attack like this. Can you tell us a little bit about why this is such a long-standing concern?
It's a real problem across the U.S., and part of it is due to the way in which water systems are set up across the country, which is a mix of public ownership, private ownership, a lot of very large systems that serve big municipal areas such as New York City, a lot of very small ones that serve rural communities and such. Over 150,000 drinking water systems in the US alone, around 15,000 wastewater management systems. And the problem is that people just don't know who is operating what half the time. When you talk to the Water Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which is designed to share threat intelligence among water facilities, they readily admit that they don't know. The federal government doesn't always know. The people who do know are at the state level, but it's very, very difficult to reach these people. And then secondly, the problem is also that a lot of these places are critically under-resourced. Their job is to maintain pipes and provide water. It's not necessarily to invest in cybersecurity. They often think that they're too small to be a target of Iran or Russia or North Korea, but recent events have proved otherwise. We don't know who targeted the facility in the city of Arkansas, but we do know from previous attacks in a suburb just outside of Pittsburgh, for instance, last year, called Aliquippa, which was targeted by an Iranian-backed group, also in North Texas as well, that these systems are the targets of nation-state-backed actors.
What have the White House and the EPA done to get a handle on this and make sure that these water systems are safe?
So to their credit, they have tried. A couple of years back, the EPA did try to introduce cybersecurity assessments as part of the annual mandatory sanitary audits that water systems have to perform every year. But that met with pretty significant opposition from the attorneys general of states such as Iowa, Missouri, who said it would be onerous, that the EPA overstepped their authority, that it would cost too much, and the EPA withdrew the rule as a result. The White House hasn't quite let it go, though. They did send a letter out earlier this year to all 50 states asking the governors to perform risk assessments on their cybersecurity, their water systems. Ann Neuberger, the National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technology, did say that she had around 40 responses back, and they are working now to kind of look through them and see where they can perhaps take a second stab at introducing standards in the sector.
So are there any security standards right now?
Not really. A lot of these systems don't have dedicated IT staff either. The guy who runs the computers will be the guy who cuts the lawn on a Wednesday. And for them, they often use outsourced technology providers or just try and hope for the best, really.
Are attacks on water systems or water waste systems common, though?
Common in the sense that there have been some recently, and probably enough to raise eyebrows, and potentially dangerous ones as well. There was an attempted breach at a water plant in Oldsmar in Florida back in 2021 where an engineer saw someone change the levels of lye in the drinking water to potentially lethal levels and then immediately corrected it. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it does go to show that if you let your guard down, this could have potentially catastrophic consequences.
James, we talked about how the White House is planning a second attempt at cyber regulations for water systems. But, zooming out, what are the challenges when it comes to regulating critical infrastructure like water?
The problem with introducing regulations for critical infrastructure sectors is that there are 16 of them, and they all have their own regulators. They all have their own stakeholders. They all have their own powerful lobby groups and political allies, some of whom don't necessarily want to see minimum standards in place. And you see the same thing happening in healthcare. You see the same thing happening in financial services, in other sectors as well. It's just a very difficult, very complicated system that we have, and it takes a lot of diplomacy, a lot of time, and a lot of effort to convince people to get on board with it. But, unfortunately, all it takes is one big breach to really convince everyone, but by then it's too late.
All right, that was our reporter, James Rundle.
So there's a story about the lady in Louisiana. She's a flood survivor, and the rescue teams, they come through, and they're, I guess, trying to recover people. And they see this woman, she's wading through the streets. I guess it had been some time after the storm. And I guess they were shocked that, she was alive. And the rescue worker said to her, "Oh my God, how did you survive? How did you do it? Where have you been?" And she said, "Where I've been? Where you been?" Where you been? You know what I'm saying?
Across the South this morning, the raging floodwaters may have faded, but the fallout from historic levels of rain and violent winds have left communities from Georgia to North Carolina virtually unlivable.
We have got to rebuild everything.
North Carolina now reporting at least 109 deaths. FEMA's administrator, speaking to NBC's Lester Holt, says there are still areas that are out of reach.
What's the order of priority right now?
It is still life safety. There's a lot of search and rescue teams here on the ground.
The Swannanoa fire chief telling us replacing the water pipes and fixing the roads above them will require plenty of time.
I was born and raised here. And this is, I don't think there's a word to describe it. I don't know how long this is going to take.
And power is still a problem, too. The Carolinas and Georgia have some 700,000 customers in the dark as the National Weather Service released this stunning image from space a day after Helene made landfall. A big swath of the region just black.
This storm is easily the most destructive that I've seen.
Bruce Hudson works for Skyfire AI, a company that uses advanced drone technology to help governments and even private companies track tough terrain. He gave us a first-hand look at the search for the missing in Burnsville, North Carolina.
It looks like half the road has just been cut off, and it's just slid into the river.
Yeah, and so that's mostly the problem that we're falling into, is that not only can public safety not get to individuals, individuals can't even get out.
On Thursday, President Biden continued to survey the damage, promising states will have the resources they need as heartbreak abounds.
With every single wave, it's trying to wash away a memory.
And a race that continues to find loved ones who remain unaccounted for.
And look, it is hard, guys, to even fathom how difficult it would be to go through piles of debris like this in areas where they're only accessible by plane. But there is another explanation for why there are these wild swings in the number of missing people. The sheriff saying there are major communication gaps here as these county officials go door to door knocking to try to talk to folks. There's language barriers. In many cases, they're not clear how many people actually live in those homes, and a large unhoused population in the Asheville area, making this really a moving target. Craig, back to you.
Yeah, Sam Brock for us there in Western North Carolina. Sam, thanks.
And here comes a young man from Georgetown and Zaire.
You talk about trailers, this is the ultimate trailer. About 2 seconds behind, but finishes.
Mutombo came to Georgetown, couldn't speak English, learned English through French, one of 5 languages he speaks. When he came off the plane, John Thompson was there to greet him. Thompson didn't believe he was 7'2", and Dikembe told us when Coach Thompson saw me, he didn't bother to go anywhere near any bookstore. He said he got me a pair of tennis shoes. He said, I just want to see how you handle the basketball.
Well, John, being as smart as he is, what he actually did is he sent a scout and said, look, if this guy's really small, don't bring him around the gym or our offices. But if he's legit, bring him right over.
That is Dikembe Mutombo's full name. He said he wants to see his name in lights. Boy, it's going to take a lot of neon.
You go ahead and take it.
Unfortunately, the world lost a giant this week. Dikembe Mutombo, rest in peace and in love to his family. Your dad and him had the same agent. You've known him for a long time, mentor on and off the court, tough love, kind of gave you the blueprint to your post-career, if you would say. So speak to, obviously, how instrumental he was in your life and just, what he meant to you.
Dikembe is somebody who meant a lot to a lot of people, so I want to choose my words wisely. What a special, obviously in the basketball community it's tough, but just all around the world, the patience that he had for people is what resonates the most. I remember going to Georgetown camp as a kid and getting to see him early on in his NBA career, and just always gave everybody the time of day. And, his whole thing was just about never forgetting where you're from. I think that's something that resonates for people all around, just the guys from Kinshasa. He started playing basketball at 18 years old.
Crazy.
He got to Georgetown University to be a medical student. A doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Thompson sees him on campus. He's like, yo, you need to get your big ass in the gym.
Yeah.
And you know what? And it was just what an honor to be around that guy. I got to spend a lot of time with him afterwards, with the BAL, just being able to invest in a basketball league with the NBA on the continent, and just to be around him. Just what a special guy, and I'll never forget Dikembe always, I used to call him Tonton. That's my, this uncle, and I would come in just, t-shirts, sweatpants, and he was like, yo, if you're around me, just don't be dressing like that. You need to, this is business now. Tighten up. So that's the energy that Dikembe had, and it wasn't just basketball. It's all around the world. Just people, really, he deserved that love that he gets, man.
Rest in peace,
Rest
man.
in peace,
Sorry for your loss,
yeah,
bro.
respect.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to take a closer look now at the significance of Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance's weekend appearance at a town hall event organized by top Christian nationalist leaders. The event's host, Lance Wallnau, is a leading figure in what's called the New Apostolic Reformation. That's a far-right Christian nationalist movement that wants to erase the separation between church and state, and increasingly intersects with the Trump campaign. We're joined now by Matthew Taylor, senior scholar at the educational nonprofit Institute for Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies. His book, out tomorrow, is titled The Violent Take It by Force, the Christian Movement That Is Threatening Our Democracy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
So who is Lance Wallnau, and how does his brand of Christian nationalism differ from the white evangelical Christianity that's been the power base of the GOP for decades?
Lance Wallnau is a Christian nationalist leader. I would even go so far as to call him a Christian supremacist leader, kind of a hardline form of Christian nationalism. He's a Pentecostal charismatic minister. He has various titles that attach to him. He sometimes will call himself an apostle, sometimes a prophet, sometimes an evangelist. He's a business consultant. He came up in this movement called the New Apostolic Reformation, which is really the focus of my book. And the New Apostolic Reformation was a set of leadership networks that were established by Wallnau's mentor, C. Peter Wagner, in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And they became really the backbone of the movement of Christian Trumpism, some of the first leaders to endorse Donald Trump, including Wallnau, in 2015, before any of the primaries really got started. And they have been some of the most effective Christian propagandists for Donald Trump, offering prophecies, modern prophecies, to backstop and to bolster Donald Trump's case to Christians.
So help us understand the symbiotic relationship between MAGA ideology and white Christian nationalism, and what the appeal is.
Well, Donald Trump came up studying televangelists, actually. His spiritual advisor, Paula White, describes in her book how he has studied televangelists for years, has studied their skills, studied how they preach, how they teach, and I think in many ways he tries to mimic them in his speech. So there's a kinship in the way that he speaks. This is the realm of televangelism. We're talking about this non-denominational, charismatic space that's pretty amorphous, very open to new experiences, new forms of Christianity, and they have gathered around Trump. They've seen seen him as a vehicle for their own power, as someone who is backstopping their movement, someone who will defend Christianity. Even though they recognize he's not a good Christian, they think that he can be a champion for them. And because they have all these prophecies about him coming out of the prophets in their movement, they believe that he has a special anointing to lead America, to redeem America. And the assassination attempts that have happened in the last few months on him have only cemented those narratives that he is divinely appointed.
Well, I've heard evangelical leaders compare Donald Trump to Cyrus of the Bible, to King David, to say that he is a flawed leader, but that he has a role in God's divine plan, the biblical mandate. How does all of this, in your view, pose a threat to democracy, picking up with the subtitle of your book?
I can't think of a single national political figure in American history who has as many religious narratives and religious attachments foisted onto him as Donald Trump. He is someone that is seen as a figure of destiny. He is seen as someone who is anointed by God for this role. And that's a very dangerous sentiment to have in a democracy, where elections are about the will of the people, not the will of God. Elections are about how we negotiate our differences. And as you have all these attachments of religious ideas to Donald Trump, the language of these movements has become more and more Manichaean. It's good versus evil. It's angels versus demons. It's Trump versus evil. And as that becomes the ethos of the Trump campaign and of the Christian nationalist sentiments around him, people are becoming much more apocalyptic in their expectations around these elections. And we saw this ramp up of religious fervor in the 2020 election that very much culminated on January 6th. And we saw many manifestations of Christian nationalism that day. Lance Wallnau himself was there that day and was one of the most effective organizers for Christians that day. I'm worried that we're going to see something similar right now because that rhetoric is ramping up once again in this election.
When Donald Trump himself uses violent rhetoric, when he engages in demagoguery, saying, for instance, as he did at a rally over this past weekend, that allowing police to have one really violent day, that would help end crime, despite violent crime being at a near 50-year low, how do his supporters, how do his white Christian nationalist followers hear that? How do they interpret it?
Well, this is a movement that is already steeped in a rhetoric of violence. Now, they'll often frame it and say this is about spiritual violence. We're talking about battling back demons, battling back Satan. But they're also pointing at real people. Lance Wallnau has said that Kamala Harris is a manifestation of demons, that you can't even listen to her because it's just demons speaking through her. He accused her of using witchcraft to present herself in an appealing way in the most recent debate. So they're pointing at their political opponents, their enemies, and saying they are filled with demons. The demons are in them. We need to fight the demons. And this was a lot of the rhetoric that fueled January 6th, this belief that we were coming to this culmination of American history, this belief that it was God versus Satan, and that the election itself was a realm of cosmic combat.
Matthew Taylor, the new book is The Violent Take It by Force, the Christian movement that is threatening our democracy. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you, Jeff.
Apologies to the late, great Dikembe Mutombo. Wanted to make sure we ended with that, but that segment with VP Vance, white evangelical Christian, religion of white supremacy, I had that in advance. Like, I meant to play it anyway, neglected, had to get that one in. And it reminded me, it was a listener, it was this year because we were talking about the election. They said white or religion of white supremacy. They were talking about the evangelicals and their role in the coming election and their support of Donald Trump, even in places like New York, not even South, North Carolina, Georgia, places like that in the U.S., places further north. And they were like, wow, I need to do research on this. And I was thinking, me too. Maybe we all should. Religion of white supremacy. Particularly to see, how things turn out next month, a couple weeks away. But new book, right? Nonfiction. Been talking about that for the longest. Content to read. There's a few things that I thought, like, man, I should make time to get that report in. Any hoodles. Context of White Supremacy, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, October 5, 2024. So I have been told. Our weekly compensatory call-in, not for spectators. Dial in if you have thoughts, observations to share. Certainly, everyone impacted, all the non-white people impacted by Hurricane Helene. Man, I hope you have got power back. I know we heard from Non-Clemson Dad, Double O Dimples, Mama C. They were still down in South Carolina and talking about the power was still out. They had to borrow a generator and all that jazz. Got, new non-white child and all the rest of it. Hopefully, everybody who is down in that region, all the non-white people, like Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, hopefully you got your power back. Forget, the generators and all that craziness. Power back on, running water. You can take a shower, flush your toilet, cook your food. If you have small children, whatever, you take care of them. They can sleep in a comfortable bed with lighting. You don't have to worry about looting. I did see signs this week. Looters will be shot. I said, oh man. My black brothers and sisters in NOLA, y'all been laying low for the last 2 decades, decide you're going to come back out and wreak havoc, and at the same time, a year too. A little bit of nostalgia sake. Y'all, and then migrated too. You hopped in the vehicle and drove from Louisiana north up to the Carolinas to do some looting in the middle of the hurricane? I don't know. I did see the sign. I posted it too. Looters will be shot in the Carolinas. I think this is North Carolina specifically. Anywho, if anything, that reminded me of one component of Katrina that we have talked about. Numerous folks talked about being in the path of the storm and all that, and they closed jobs or they didn't and all the rest of it. Man, if you're in a geographic location where they have tornadoes, hurricanes, anything of the sort, make sure if you're going to stay, you're not going to evacuate, go, out of town, go stay with relatives until things calm down. Hey, is this a region where we will be secure? Do we think this is going to be someplace where if a storm or electricity goes out, we're going to be a hostage? We're not going to be able to go outside, nothing, because the white people, they're going to have their little armed militias and signs up blocking off the street and everything, like they did in New Orleans during Katrina. Is it going to be that sort of situation? Are we going to be safe, or is this going to be really dangerous if we stay here where we're not really going to be able to go anywhere, even if we do have a vehicle, or just go out and walk to get things that we should need, supplies, water, anything of this, or even just to get news, find out what's happening? That is for sure something to think about. And if you are going to stay there, security. That can mean lots of things, but security, if you are going to be there, and even security if there's no electricity, if you have a security system of some sort or what have you, does that still work if the electricity goes out or no? Power being out, does that compromise any of your security systems, or are you still good? Not the sort of thing that you want to wait and find out after Helene hits and destroys everything. Today's date, October 5. I gave out the date, October 5, 2024, so I've been told. Not for spectators. We have any folks, if you have, info, suggestions, making it through the hurricane, any tips for other folks, especially parents, folks that have younger children, any tips, suggestions on all of that, or reports from enduring all that the past week or so, let us know. The number 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. A few things before we nab folks who dialed in. One, we are listener-supported, counter-racist radio. Invest. Hit the PayPal button. You can go to the blog. It is at racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. You'll see the PayPal button in the top right corner. Directly beneath the button, you'll see the links for PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. The Cash App address, cash.app/$the-cows. Enormous gratitude to all the investors who kept us broadcasting for 15 years. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy, and hopefully not just talking, wasting time, sharing constructive information about what is exactly happening in the system of white supremacy, accurate more often than not, helping non-white people grasp what it means to be classified as white. Now, let's see. Some of the news reports that we heard at the beginning this week. Pause for Margaret Burroughs. Pause for Margaret. When I heard that, I thought Dr. Welsing. I am sure Dr. Welsing was a scholar about Dr. Burroughs, her life and times, and I thought of Dr. Welsing immediately, especially being constructive with your time and energy and the importance of studying where you are. The young lady for WBEZ, when she was doing the report. I wish they had something like that when I was in school. Like, man, you could get on public radio and local, even if it's just local, and, give a report about something that's constructive. Like, man, shout to Tierra Hicks out doing great things and constructive. Wow, I'm super envious. Anyway, Dr. Margaret Burroughs. I think I left the doctor out. My apologies. But it reminded me so much of Dr. Welsing and going to Stateville Correctional Center to work with black males. Like, come on. I just said that, right? Someone in greater confinement too. But we're not going to forget about him. You still a part, of our little raggedy, not a community, but group of victims. And we're going to go visit and maybe teach Dr. Welsing's book. Like, just wow, right on for Dr. Margaret Burroughs. And that's exactly what I'm talking about in so many ways. When I say study local history, right there. It should not be possible for little Tierra Hicks going through, she hadn't graduated yet, to be matriculating through Chicago public schools, and she gets to high school. Really, she gets to middle school. And Dr. Burroughs, who was that? I don't know. What is she? She had a restaurant, juke joint. I don't know no Burroughs. I don't even know how to spell that. That is a disgrace. And you can just go right on down the line for Chicago. That's Mayor Washington. Real talk. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Oh, yeah. No. Like, we get to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. We get to them later. Like, these are people that are right here in Chicago. Leonida McLean, man. Chicago Tribune. We read that in the Catherine Massey Book Club. A Foot in Each World. You should know her name, right? Mental health. That is exactly what I've been saying for years. You should study local history and study it with your children, man. If you are Tierra Hicks, you're her attempted mom. You're her attempted dad or attempted, grandmother, auntie, whatever it is. Oh, my goodness. My heart would be overflowing. Let's go to Northwestern. We can study about when they didn't allow niggers here. We can study their raggedy reparations program, and we'll get some books on Dr. Margaret Burroughs. Whoopee! And then you can do a report on it. And then we'll go get Chicago pizza, or we'll make Chicago pizza vegan. That's what I'm talking about. Doing things with you, doing constructive things, make it a family project. We go learn about Bubbly Creek. So much history to learn about Emmett Till. Anyway, Pamela Evans Harris, lots of connections to Chicago. We talked about that for a long time. Next, that segment that talked about David Douglas High School in Oregon, where the young lads and the coach report that they face racism on the road. Now, I started that. That was victim of white supremacy, Dikembe Noah. He was talking about how sports, it brings people together, and you get across economics and class, black, white, because he went to school at the University of Florida. Go, hey, my black brother down at the courthouse. Go Gators. I bet you remembers when Dikembe Noah and them was winning everything, basketball. Anyway, he said that it was so segregated, so-called, when he was at Jacksonville, University of Florida. He said the white people and black people didn't kick it together, whatever, and their success, Tim Tebow even, they were all there at the same time, their success brought everybody together. That is so, victims guaranteed qualified to my black brother, Dikembe Noah, love you, my black brother. But victims guaranteed qualified, that is so lame. Like, if that were the case, I was going to say Jackie Robinson, forget Jackie Robinson, Jack Johnson would have solved all this a long time ago. Jesse Owens would have solved all this a lot. Wilma Rudolph, Floyd Patterson would have solved this a long time ago. Sports does not end white. That's Dr. John Hoberman's whole book, Darwin's Athlete, that people have been saying that lame cliche forever. Nah, man, Joe Louis, we would have KO'd racism long time ago. Nah, man. Not Tiger Woods. Nah, man. Then we go to Oregon, and I wanted to emphasize that it wasn't the South, man. It wasn't Jacksonville, Florida. This was in Portland, Oregon, where the students said, they calling us niggers. That's right down the road from me. I could drive to Oregon. I could be there. If we left right now, we'd be there before 10 p.m. Pacific. Calling us nigger. That's what I said. It's so many reasons not to play tackle football. Are you out of your mind? We're going to go out here and be tough. And man, they're calling us. And the monkey sounds, they put the monkey sounds on the little black brothers. It's almost 2025, and they put the monkey sounds on. They went through all those riots and said that the white moms were out in the streets. We upset. We love us some George Floyd to have monkey sounds in 2025 in Portland, Oregon. Next, the report. They're going to do the bird names. They've been talking about that for a minute, the Ornithology Society. That we didn't. I agree. Mr. Fuller even talked about that years ago. He said, hey, if at the end of the day, you don't have perfect people, and we got a system of white supremacy racism, so there's not really a reason for us to be jumping up and down about anybody. Why are we jumping up and down to praise a racist? Why are we jumping up and down to praise a victim of racism? Someone in shackles, beaten on and raped. Nah. He said, let's not be in the habit of naming buildings and all that after people, and particularly the birds. Name them after what they do or how they look or what have you, so that the name helps you identify, oh, this is a woodpecker. This is a blue jay. There we go. Now I grasp what I'm looking at. Now I just want to put my name and brand everything in the known universe. Like, nah, I'm not with any of them. They said that people are mad. Like, what? And even who? Did they go around and interview? Is Leroy mad that you all are changing all these names? Lakeisha, Devante, they're upset that their birding experience is going to be different. Little fella that Bay Area mom works with, they talked about, they could even include that in class. That'd be something to read, right? You could break out the National Geographic, or that was on NPR, the report I played about them changing the names. Got all these white supremacists named after the birds, right? Break that out in class. Let's pick out some of the other names that are slave owners and racists, lynchers. Let's see. Oh, we got a double dip. I missed Dr. Welsing. We got not one, we got two reports closing schools in the UK don't have enough children. That's happening here in the US too, and in Canada. Reminded me immediately, not the book that we talked about, but one of her books right there on my shelf, Judith Finlayson. Now, we talked about You Are What Your Grandparents Ate, which is important for many reasons, but that one paragraph, hey, by 2060, 60% of the white dudes in North America, that would include Canada and Europe, will be infertile. That's what she said. Reports like that, oh yes, I believe that. They didn't even include, they gave all those other reasons. They didn't even include, wait a minute, what about the fertility rates in terms of males? Do they actually have the sperm to produce these little people, even if we do all that with child care and cost of living and everything else? Or is it a whole lot of things going on to make it so that we just don't have a whole lot of white babies coming out like that anymore? Even when they said we're going to need immigration in Canada of people who don't look like the native citizens. I had an eye roll on that like, man, back up for real. Are white people native to Canada? Back up for real, like you know good. Come on. Now, if we're going to get people that are native, look like the natives here, oh, maybe I got a chance here. I don't know, but it shouldn't be nobody that look like Justin Trudeau, like you know goodness well. That's not what the natives look like. Like, come on. Anyway, white genetic, and then that's when you can put, that would be one right there. Check the newspaper globally just for that. Now, how often is this popping up where we don't have enough people? We don't have enough children. We got to close the schools. We don't even have enough employees. How often are you hearing that? Because I'm hearing that a lot now. All over the world, lots. And then what are the ramifications of that? That's another one where, oh yes, this problem can be solved. Racism, white supremacy. This problem can be solved because apparently you do not have to have a planet with people classified as white. Problem can be solved. Let's see. Snapchat. Oh, and white people don't care about children anyway. Man, I should trademark that. That is Gus T. I didn't get that from none of y'all. Gus T. Ah. They got the warnings about the Snapchat dangers. They said it was one account on Snapchat that got 75 complaints. Let them complain about me 75 times for anything. Stealing pistachios at the grocery store, flirting and catcalling white women 75 times, and nothing was done about it. And this is not 75 times of, saying explicit comment. This is 75 times of sexually harassing children. What are you going to do? Why that would be another one. We keep talking about, hey, wait as long as possible before you give your child a smartphone. There you go. Wait as long as possible. Dumb phone. It's lots of reasons. That's just, they said Meta, that's a totally different service. They said Meta, it's become a regular little breeding ground for the child rapists. They love using that platform. It works out so well. We can target all the little people that we want. White people do not care about children. Let's see. The brain protection in California. I struggled to even figure out what audio to use to preface that report because it hurt my head to even think like, Lord, what? Like, oof, and they were talking about if you use these apps and everything and they give out the data and all that and how you think of it, like, wow. We really need to get cracking solving this problem ASAP, because they'll just have more and more technology that works even better to strengthen the system of white supremacy racism. To just have technology to study how you think. Let's see. Oh, and wait a minute. The report on Snapchat. I just want to point out, for words, counter-racist literacy. Frequently, they don't say racism. We had a number of reports today that talked about, actually use the term white supremacy, which is stunning. But most of the time, they don't say racism. They'll say bigotry, prejudice, that type of thing. The report on Snapchat, they didn't say child rapists. They said bad actors. Is Angelina Jolie going to be performing? Is Mariah Carey on stage? What do you mean, bad actors? Shout to my man John Amos. Did not forget Coming to America and Roots. Not a bad actor. Good Times, of course, but he did pass away this week. The great John Amos. But this bad actors. You talk about suspected child rapists and child predators. Bad. They'll use that term a lot. That term should never be used. If you're talking about criminal activity, bad actors? They don't call Bill Cosby no bad actor. They don't call Diddy no bad actor. Especially if we talk about child rape. No, you're a suspected child rapist. Suspected child sexual predator. Words are important. Let's see. Well, speaking of words, when they did that tacky segment talking about the convictions in the Tyree Nichols case, and these are all black officers in Tennessee that were connected. Hurricane Helene impacted Tennessee too. And they said that it didn't seem that most of these black officers, privileged black male, I guess that was part of their privilege, they were not, most of them, convicted for like murder or manslaughter or anything like that. They got convicted for like lying about it and that sort of thing, covering up evidence, obstruction of justice, that sort of thing. And they were saying, is this justice? Now, he's still dead, so I don't, But is this justice? Well, we can't call it justice. The announcer said, "What is progress?" That word, we had that on the program this week with Miss Godine. Progress. Nobody said nothing about no progress, and he's still dead. He's still dead. Like, what are you talking about? Progress? He's still dead. They disbanded the Scorpion unit, I guess, if that means something to you. He's still dead. Nobody got a murder conviction here, even though you got it on camera. Again. Progress. Lamest word. That word should never be used when talking about white supremacy racism. Never. Either the problem is solved or it's not. It's not. By 3050, we're going to make a lot of progress. Boy, you give us a good 1,000 years, we're going to make all kinds of... Come on. Let's see. Into cybersecurity at the water facility. That's one I don't want to hear no progress. Like, what? Cyber attacks at the water facility? That should be top news. Like, I want to know all about that. Forget, who got snubbed at the country awards or the football season or new Halloween candy. They would attack the water. That is so Turner Diaries. Haven't we been hearing it? I said as soon as I heard in Carolinas the power was going out because of Hurricane Helene, it immediately reminded me, weren't the race soldiers, weren't they attacking the power grids all across the U.S., even here in Washington State? Hadn't they been doing that for 2 years? That's what it reminded me of immediately. Mother Nature gave them an assist in the Carolinas, like y'all was shooting at the station. Bang, there you go. Knocked all that out. Don't even worry about it. Now the attacks at the water. I didn't think of no Russia. I didn't think of no foreign agent. They trying to hop in. Are these some of Eric Adams' homies, cronies, trying to interfere? I immediately thought the usual. Matter of fact, the same people who were attacking the electric grids, they just convicted a white woman in Baltimore for this. Maryland, same thing, Maryland. They just convicted her a couple days ago. Same thing, attacking the electric grids. Race soldier. up to the same, and that's right out of the Turner Diary. And particularly, we're going to attack infrastructure during the election season. Might be some advantages to prepping. Store as much water, I guess, as possible. They're hitting the electric grids and the water facilities. Let's see. Anything? Talked about the hurricane at the top and the death of Dikembe. We'll be able to talk more. If anything, it made me think, wow, the timing with the Catherine Massey Book Club, exquisite, because we had just started studying the Congo and colonialism, Patrice Lumumba's assassination, and I didn't even know. I knew who Dikembe Mutombo was. I had no idea he was born in the Congo. He built his hospital on Boulevard Lumumba. We are supposed to be paying attention to the Congo at this moment. Dikembe built a hospital for or in honor of his mother. She wasn't even able to get to the hospital in the Congo. There's white people to blame for that too. Built a hospital. Dikembe Mutombo. Come on, man. That is one. He can be right there with Braun on that one. Braun built a school. Dikembe built the hospital. Maybe that's why they take all the money from the black dudes. They say maybe, just maybe, it might be one or two here and there. Even some of these old pretend black people that are not even born here, they just might. You know what? I don't need 15 Maybachs. I don't need 15 Bentleys. I don't need 15 gold chains that 500 black people had to die in the mines of Africa to get. In fact, I'm going to build a school. Yeah. I'll build a grocery store. Yeah. I'm going to build a hospital. I'm going to look out for my black brothers. Do something kind of like, whoa. You're supposed to be snorting crack, marrying white women, making it rain at the club. That's making a hospital. School. Right, and Dikembe, he wasn't even making all the super duper money that they got now. You got $200 million contract and all that. Like, if he played that, he could have built 3, 4, 5 hospitals. They would have really hated him then. And privileged black male Dikembe Mutombo died at 58. Even with all that privilege and 58, that's heaps of black male privilege right there. J. Strom Thurmond lived to be 101. NBA Dikembe, Georgetown Hoya graduate, 58. And he still outlived Michael Jackson and DMX. I think even Prince and Kobe Bryant. Black male privilege. More to come on Dikembe Mutombo, whose hospital again on Boulevard Lumumba. Number to dial 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I'm looking at Margaret Burroughs, Dr. Margaret Burroughs at Statesville Prison, where she's with some of the privileged black male inmates, and it reminded me, because she's embracing one of the black males here who's got a lot of kinky hair on his skull, probably why he's in confinement. And it reminded me when they in the report said, oh, hugging the inmates is not allowed in Statesville Correctional Facility. We don't do no hugging, kissing. You keep your hands to yourself around these raping, no-count black males, probably some of whom were incarcerated by John Burge falsely, but whatever. You're not supposed to do no touching. Like, these are not human beings. The man not. You're not supposed to do. You hug and love on and kiss on an actual person. If you find a little white child, you go hug and love on them. These old savage, raping, crack-peddling, black male heathen, you don't hug on them. You don't kiss on them. They might even try to rape you. You give them space. Back up. Give them 10 feet. Just back up. Whew. The man, but apparently Dr. Burroughs didn't follow the rules. She came to get a hug from these black males. Wow. Dr. Margaret Burroughs. Let's see. Folks who dialed in, commentary to share. Folks who have hand up line should be open. Proceed.
Can I be heard?
Hello? Oh, go ahead.
Okay, cool. This is non-Clemson grad. I hope everyone's having a good evening. I am now happy to report that the power is now on. It came on about 2.5 hours ago now. But I do have some other things to report in addition to this. In Elise, in the county I am in South Carolina, there's still about 11% of the population that still doesn't have access to power. Also, the three main states affected by the hurricane, North, South Carolina, and Georgia, South Carolina moved from number one power outage. South Carolina moved from the number one state with power outages to third behind North Carolina and Georgia. As of right now, North Carolina has 183,400 people without power. Georgia has 126,800 people without power. And South Carolina still has a little less than 120,000 people without power. So the efforts continue, but North Carolina seems to be all by itself with this particular issue that is happening right now. So in addition to some of the stuff I was reporting yesterday, hold on for a sec. There we go. So, during this week, we were constantly at friends' houses who had power, so we could at least do, get access to power, and especially internet, so we could, do our work from home type work. And one of my friends, he lives on a, let's say, a really, really high-end development area, and it is his conjecture that the white property owners of the property, because he rents on this property, said that he believes that the owner of the property called the electric company to complain about the power being out, and about an hour and a half later, the power was on. This was on Tuesday. So again, it's his conjecture that the white man pulled his I'm white and I say so, get this fixed card to get power sooner than maybe they would have gotten it. Next, I talked about Clemson having their homecoming game last week on Saturday. They did cancel class on Monday, but they had classes for the rest of the week. Other colleges in the area, though, closed for half, if not the rest of the week, because they were still having issues with power. The public schools in the area remain closed. They've extended their closure till Monday. I think I said that yesterday. But chances are they're going to extend that from Monday, maybe till the middle of the week, maybe even the end of the week. We were talking about awareness, who actually knew that this storm was happening. So I had family members, for example, I had a cousin and her family who lived in the Charlotte area. And, I have also family that lives in the New York City area. And my cousin in Charlotte, even though, she was not hindered or touched by the hurricane, but it did come close to Charlotte to a certain degree. Some places around Charlotte did lose power in the suburban areas, I believe. And she did not even know. What happened was she was sick for the whole weekend during the hurricane, and she just happened to turn on her TV, and that's when she called me and found out that, oh, yeah, there's a hurricane, and people are still affected. That was back on Sunday, so that was about 6 days ago. My mother was unaware in New York City. We were just having a random conversation like we do. I try to talk to my mother at least 2 times a week. And in one of our conversations, I told her, the power's out here. She thought it was like, nothing was wrong. But now she knows. Let's see, what else? Of course, I did say, though, the power was out, we had running water, but some people had the pumps. They were on pumps. So when the power went out, if you were in, like, the mountain areas where water had to be pumped up the mountain to you, you had no access to running water. Most people who live in city areas usually, when water systems are built, they use a gravity system to get water to people. So when you're above a certain height from the water source, you have to use pumps to get it to you. And of course, depending on the height of your building, if your building usually goes above, let's say, 6 or 7 stories, then you need a pump. So people in those types of areas or high buildings, you need a pump, and when the power went out, they lost access to water. And then the last thing I'm going to say is that during the week, to try to keep our daughter entertained, one of the things we did was that we took her to a play cafe, which was really nice. A lot of white kids, not a lot of black kids in there, but it was still fun for her, and we had a good time with her. While there, one of the parents, a white male, had a BLM shirt that said, "Biden loves minors." And with that, I'll mute my line.
Biden loves minor. Oh, whoopee. We already got our claps. Whoopee. Power restored. Whoopee. Who wants to be an attempted parent? Small child. No Jews. Come on. Biden loves minors. So that reminds me of the QAnon that they were talking about, saying they were raping children and all the like. They ready to get their January 6th together if things don't go right. Like, what in the? Come on. Anyway, it would not surprise me if some of the white people were powerful, especially if they, unlike old non-Clemson dad, you got some powerful white people. We graduate. I'm a Tiger alum. I pick up the phone, call my other Tiger brethren. Boop, boop, boop. You know the secret code, go Tiger. And absolutely, that's you over there talking about, I don't do no Clemson. I'm not down with the Orange Crush. I don't know. Tough titty. Hope you got some homies to lend you a generator till you get it together. That is being white. I think some of that happened with Katrina too, in terms of where the power came back first. And, not that I'm surprised about that. I'm just saying. Any hoodles, much obliged, Irie, conceding. In New Orleans, no less. Cancer Alley, did you have commentary, ma'am?
Oh, thank you. I had to call back in. I accidentally hung it up. You just asked me something. Did I have commentary? That's what you asked. Yes, I do. I was thinking about what you wanted to know, what advice anyone would give that's been through a hurricane before. I was thinking, number one, anything that you haven't already prepped yourself in doing, or should I say practiced doing in an emergency situation, whatever it is, don't do it now, because you're probably going to mess it up. It's probably going to make your situation worse. If you're in a secure place, I would say the best thing to do is chill. That's a metaphor, but relax. Try to relax. If you're at home and you don't have lights, you're really going to have to conserve energy. People who are able-bodied are going to have to take turns resting. So in my unit, my care mate is not nocturnal like me. So I would probably be, watch during the night, and during the day it would be his turn. I would suggest that. If your situation is that bad and you need things, you're going to have to decide, if you're at home or if you, I'm speaking mostly about people who are still, in their domiciles. But if you need something, you're running out of something, you probably need to figure out what you want to barter with at this point. And, do it willingly, but be careful, obviously, who you barter with. Hopefully, you're not in a neighborhood where everyone in the neighborhood dislikes you, or in an apartment building where everyone in the apartment building, you don't get along with anybody on your floor. That's what I would say, really. The preparation, of course, always comes before the event. So that's why I said anything that hasn't been prepared for or practiced before the hurricane, I wouldn't recommend trying it now because it could cause more harm. I don't know if people would agree with that or not, but I think I'm trying to produce justice, so I think that's logic that I'm offering that suggestion with. I wanted to share some other stuff, but, the hurricane situation is more important. So, yeah, if there's other people on the line that want to share, I'll let it go for them. But one thing you said, something you said about a planet full of something, I can't remember, I'm sorry. Having a planet full of white people or something. You said something about we don't have to have a planet full of white people. I think you said. I agree. Concurrence. Excuse me. Like if having a planet full of white people dominating yields this, and other hurricanes and whatnots, then no, I would agree. It probably would be better. It would be better than not have a system of racism, white supremacy. But this is the work of white people, y'all. In my opinion, they know how to. They believe in order out of chaos. So I've been told by white people. So it's unfortunate, and I hope all is well to anyone affected, and to the family, the husband and wife and baby. May the Creator continue to protect you all and keep you well and stable. I mean, line.
Much obliged, Irie. That does make sense. Do not wait until the hurricane. If you have not practiced gunfire, probably not the best time to decide I'm going to go out and do some shooting when it's 100 miles an hour wind. That would make sense. Haven't driven before. Not going to go out and drive an 18-wheeler first time with all the water in the street. Chill if you can. Sit safely. Not going out and doing experiments and trying out things for the first time in a dangerous situation. Danger for lots of reasons. Man-made, racist-made. Number again, 605 313 5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate.
May I be heard?
Other folks, yes sir. Our caller New York, proceed.
Greetings everyone, greetings Gus, and thanks for the platform. One of the things that was really struck me of interest was the neurotechnology section. I have been keeping track of that to some degree. I didn't catch that that section or that information earlier on, but I did get information earlier on, I believe this week, about Gavin Newsom in California proposing a bill that was supposed to start to limit some AI technology, create a kill switch, different types of avenues to kind of make sure we don't get into a Terminator situation. I mean, for lack of better words. But one of the things I'm concerned about in this is the privacy aspect that most of us don't understand already when we commit to these devices to some degree. So one of the things I would suggest for callers, listeners, and anybody alike is to just go on a YouTube video and just Google up your privacy settings for some of your devices. Because even if you have a so-called smart TV, there's settings actually in there that would allow the TV to listen to you, and you will see advertisements pop up like consistently, like not by accident. And even me myself, knowing some of this, I've failed to turn off the voice function on my phone at one point, and we were driving past, me and my significant other, we and her were driving past a Tropicana factory, and I never saw a Tropicana factory before, but I don't drink it anymore because the sugar. But I was like, a little thrown off. I said, wow, I haven't seen that before, a Tropicana factory. When we got home and turned on the TV, a Tropicana commercial popped up, and I haven't seen one, I don't even know, in years. Just to give people an idea of how insidious it is. And we don't know the depths of the algorithms and how much data they're really gathering. I can say that there are some lawyers, if you search, that are actually suing these corporations to get their data and get access to it. But the neurotechnology is a very scary thing when you think about it, because we don't know how much they're actually pulling from the data. And now with some issues with DNA going on between companies, acquiring the DNA companies like 23andMe, now your DNA and also your personal information can be put together in one lump sum, which is a whole nother topic. Very scary, I should say. The other thing is in regards to Mayor Eric Adams. Being here in New York is just another person stepped down just this week, and it's just getting really, really ugly for him. And I think New York State is one of the only states where the governor can actually remove the mayor from the city. So far, Governor Holcomb hasn't done this yet, but I do see that coming down the pipeline if he does not, and brought a metaphor there, pipeline, but if he doesn't step down, I do see that happening. But I'd also like to state that as weird as this may sound, the same week that he got indicted, I was curious about the book from David Dinkins about a mayor's life. So I literally bought the book the same week that Eric Adams got indicted, because I just can't even imagine a black mayor in New York City, what they had to go through to actually, really get the job done, and how frustrating it may be at every turn and every angle to be just undermined and treated as less than. So I haven't cracked the book open yet. I just bought it, but it's something that I think may be a possible good read for the book club at another time. And lastly, another book, Countdown by Dr. Shauna Swan. That one, I think it's something that everybody should keep on their shelf, just because the information in there about things to eat and not eat, the Dirty Dozen, the Clean 15, fruits and vegetables, that is, to me, should be a staple in everybody's household to kind of foster a healthy environment, because it's extremely important, because it's different if you're trying to eat well, but you don't know that you're still poisoning yourself, as opposed to the reverse. And just a quick plug, there is a YouTube video for anybody who wants to watch something that's constructive with Dr. Lathan, where it's called They're Trying to Kill Us, and it's a documentary talking about the health in non-white communities and how we're being poisoned. If anybody's curious about it, it's on YouTube. It's free. It's called They're Trying to Kill Us. And Dr. Lathan is actually in that movie, in the documentary as well, speaking. With that said, I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Much obliged, our caller in New York. Wait as long as you can. Wait as long as possible before you give out that cell phone to your children. The danger lurks. We don't even know all the and even pause for Sade Robinson. I said that way back when I first heard the case. I said the first thing I heard, 19-year-old who was killed in Wisconsin this year, I said, was she drugged, swangoed, because she was only 19, she couldn't even legally go to a bar, and then this lame white dude engaged in all this? Did they meet him on some sort of app? What have you? Is that how she, met up with him? If so, hey, let's wait as long as possible before giving out the phone. Now, she was 19, so-called adult, but still. I'm sure she didn't just get that phone at 19. Let's wait as long as possible and talk frequently with your offspring about all of the dangers the system of white supremacy offers: nanotechnology, swango, Dahmer, high fructose corn syrup. Lots of aspects of the system of white supremacy racism are designed to kill non-white people, especially black people. Eating better food, major part of the system of white supremacy racism. Major. Dr. Lathan talked with us about that repeatedly, and we read Shauna Swan's Countdown in the Catherine Massey Book Club. Nonfiction, more important than fiction. She does offer a number of tidbits on better ways to eat and how bad diet impacts fertility. I was even stunned because I wasn't expecting that in the book, but it had lots of great information. Really glad that we read it. Countdown. That was a bestseller for the year that it came out. That's a more recent publication with Shauna Swan, classified as white. White genetic annihilation again. Other folks who dialed in, if you have commentary to share, *61, line should be open. Proceed.
May I be heard?
Lauren. Yes, ma'am.
Evening, everyone. I think I wanted to start with that the section where they were talking about the fertility rate in Canada, and they said it's at an all-time low. But when they listed the places that had low fertility rates, they said Italy, Japan, and South Korea. Now, the Japan and South Korea, I think that is true, but I just wondered why they listed two areas of the world with mostly non-white people. And I thought it might be to confuse listeners, because white people hear this stuff. They can watch something and they get one thing from it, and non-white people will get another thing from it. Always when they're talking about these decreasing fertility rates, I think that makes white people very nervous. Let me see. She said a couple of things I thought were interesting. She talked about bending the logic in the economy of surplus labor. I think that's really important, this idea that we have a lot of people who need jobs, because when that's the case, you mistreat the people that work for you, and you're like, oh, whatever, you don't like it, then you can quit, or I'll fire you, and they'll just hire another person to work for a very low wage and mistreat them as well. But if it's not a lot of people to hire, employers might need to treat their employees a little better. She said we're going to need more immigration in the global north. That, I don't know, that phrase is so interesting to me, global north. They don't want to say the places where white people live, and they'll call the global south, that's the places where non-white people live. But I think they include Australia in the global north, so it really has nothing to do with north and south. They call Elon Musk a natalist. I don't think I had heard that term before. And they commented on him having at least 11 children is the way they said it. Like he might have some more children that they don't know about. But I think the most important part of that, she said, the most precious resource we have is time. I think that's accurate. I put that in all caps in my notes. The Snapchat segment, I noted that bad actors part, and I think that term is usually reserved for white people who act in a massively incorrect manner. It's used to minimize, I think. They don't use that term for non-white people typically. And then also They said it pains us when bad actors abuse our service. I just don't accept that as true. And it also made me think about Ta-Nehisi Coates, that the white people being greatly pained. That made me think about that. The first post segment about our innermost thoughts being private, that was kind of touched on in Your Face Belongs to Us by Kashmir Hill. Also the facial information, DNA information, all sorts of information that goes to a particular person's body. This stuff is being monetized, and it is scary, really. The segment about the non-white people in Canada and their death rates, how they were so high. Two of the ladies, one lady said she had 8 family members die in the last couple of years. Another lady said she'd had 6. Well, they didn't say family members for her. She said she'd lost 6 people in her life, and I didn't know if it was just for drugs or they were just dying or what. But still, that's a lot of people for one person to lose in a short period of time. But what I appreciated about the segment is one of those ladies, and I don't remember their names, but she used the term white supremacy several times. And she said the ideology, I'm not saying that right, of white supremacy that was so pervasive at the founding of this country persists. It was longer than that, but that was the important part to me. While she did use that term white supremacy several times, she hesitated to call white people white people. She called them settlers a couple of times. And it was something else she said. I need to listen to it again and see exactly how she said it. I'm paraphrasing, but she talked about receiving a gift from the Creator to survive the risk that we have incurred since contact with white people. She didn't say white people, and that's not exactly how she said it, but it seemed important, so I do want to listen to it so I can see exactly how it was that she said it. And when she talked about her aunt falling and hitting her head in the bathroom, and then, she sees basically 17 medical professionals, nurse, doctors, whatever, I don't know, the EMTs, all the people who see her, and they were just sure she was a drunk Indian, and they didn't give her adequate treatment, and she died. That is terrible. And it was like towards the end of it, the person doing the interview, he asked the question, like, what keeps you going? And one lady, she talked about her grandmother who had passed, and she knows they were still walking with her. But then she said, I don't remember what you call the day, right? But she said everyone wears an orange shirt, and the settlers wear orange shirts once a year, and I guess that made her feel good. And it was just so VGQ. I'm not trying to disparage the lady, but white people wearing an orange shirt once a year is not important. I mean, they need to stop practicing racism. I don't care what color shirts they wear at all. And the other lady was talking about the School of Nursing, and she said they really committed to find their humility. Again, they didn't commit to stop practicing racism. So I just thought while they were really trying, and lots of us are really trying, we're just super confused. I'm still confused about many things. I just, I don't know. She said, we can't fix this as indigenous people. You need to fix it as non-indigenous people and allies. And I don't think white people are going to stop practicing racism willingly. And if we had that understanding, right, then we would try to do something to neutralize their practice of racism. The UVA segment, he said, just like it's against the rules to have a whites-only mentoring program, it's illegal to have a non-white-only mentoring program. But It's just white people are so slick. They almost everything that's constructive, white people make it to where it's whites only. They just don't say that, right? But their actions are more important than the words, especially when you're talking to a master deceiver. So yeah, they don't say, good credit and excellent housing and proper education and healthy food is just for white people. They just make it to where it's really easy for white people to have these things, and it's much more difficult for non-white people to have these things. They don't say it, they do it. And because we're, just trying to be open and honest about what it is we're doing. Hey, we would like a mentoring program for non-white people. They're like, can't say that. We're not that's illegal. So it seems like they're going to try to stop them from doing something constructive. There was another segment about the street cops, and they had a reasonable suspicion checklist. And one of the things was people in the car are whispering to each other. I have no idea how you would ascertain that. Does that mean they're talking? They're just talking to each other? You see their lips moving, and that means they're whispering to each other? I don't even know how you decide such things like that. The part where they were talking about Arkansas City, Kansas, and the multiple threats to cybersecurity at the water plants. They said a lot of the plants are critically undersourced, and they think that they're too small to be a target of, and it was basically non-white, they said nation states, but then they said Iran and other places that have non-white people. And a question was asked, are there any security standards right now? And the guy just answered, not really. And he's like, the guy who does the computers could be like cutting the grass on Wednesday. And he also shared a story about an engineer who saw the lye levels in the water change to what could have been a potentially fatal level, and he corrected it right away. Man, that made me think of Michael Swango, because he worked at one of those water plants too. And I think he would have tried to poison people on a large scale if given enough time and adequate opportunity. Let me see. The J.D. Vance appearance, that book they talked about, The Violent Take It by Force, that sounds interesting. And, it was something else since I talked about that. When they were talking about the natives, in one of those segments, they were talking about native-born people. This was the Canada's fertility rate segment. I read a book last week. It was called A Fever in the Heartland by Timothy Egan. And in that book, repeatedly, he called white people native-born Americans. So this might be something that white people just start doing. They'll just start calling themselves natives, just like, they call non-white people minorities. And if they say it enough, I just don't think most people will question it. But the part from the J.D. Vance segment I thought was most interesting was it said Trump studied televangelists for years. I think that's fascinating. Reference that hurricane. I know people probably say it all the time, like on the news or whatever, but really being prepared for emergencies is super important. We should keep candles, batteries, lanterns, canned food, just non-perishables, maybe a camp stove, propane heater in case it's a wintertime when the power goes out, large pots to boil water, because that might be how you have to take a bath if you still have running water anyway. And also, keep in mind, you should have a large amount of water just in case the power goes out and the water goes out, because it's not just enough water to drink. You might have to use water to flush the toilets. I was in Texas when Beryl hit, and man, it took 2 gallons of water every time to flush the toilet. That is a lot of water. So there's something that, we should be thinking about ahead of time. Baby wipes, that's also important. I don't know. I feel like I've been talking a long time, but I saw some interesting newspaper articles over the last week It was a white man in Springfield, Ohio, who got death threats from other white people for praising his Haitian employees. That was in the New York Times. In The Guardian, it was what I assume was a white man. It didn't say. It said, U.S. man 81 sentenced to 6 months for creating giant hybrid sheep. And this man took a sheep from another part of the world called a Marco Polo sheep and made another sheep. It was super illegal, okay? And what's interesting is he had a business that it was called an alternative livestock ranch that buys, sells, and breeds animals for hunting. So he produced a completely new kind of animal just so it could be killed. I don't know, that's super indicative of white culture. And there's really no telling how many times he's done this, because that's basically what he does for a living. He got 6 months in jail for this. In Oklahoma, their Republican state superintendent, he's trying to buy like 55,000 Bibles that fit the description of the Trump Bibles, because he wants to have a Bible like with U.S. documents in it. So they're $60 a piece, and he's saying that Oklahoma needs 55,000 of them. Also, let me see, 2 more things. When I was looking at Mayor Eric Adams on like Wikipedia last week, I noticed his middle name is Leroy. Thought that was interesting. And Mr. Fuller's birthday is tomorrow, just in case anyone else is interested in that. And that's all I have. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Leroy. I love it. I love it. They'll probably name call him that if he does get convicted or anything like that. Like, oh, Leroy, we knew it. We still rolling with you, Mayor Adams. Looking rough, though. Looking rough. We'll see how it goes once we get to November, especially because New York is important for lots of reasons. We'll see. See how it goes. That much obliged, Lauren. The segment she was talking about where the non-white people in Canada, they were talking about the lack of black doctors and healthcare providers. They did say white supremacy in that segment quite a few times. That was Dr. Danielle Ben Smith, B-E-H-N, Ben Smith. And the segment that she referenced, or she referenced many, but specifically about surviving, she says, every single member of our nation has an important role to play, has gifts that they've received from the Creator to keep us going and to survive the genocide that's happened since contact. And she doesn't say contact with white people, as she pointed out. And so the threat, thank you for bringing these words back, the threat to our existence, and I'm not even, trying to be overly dramatic, but when we look at the numbers, when there's just such small communities and our community is not unique, there's many other villages around what we call British Columbia that are similar, in a similar situation to us, that are the very last, have very few language speakers left. That was her direct quote about the Creator helping them survive contact with white people. Any hoodles. Let's see. If you have other commentary, folks who dialed in, the number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Most important asset we have, indeed, time. Fuller talks about that all the time as well. Not wasting time and energy. Life currency. I've emphasized that Dr. John Henry Clarke said that as well, that nobody has an infinite supply of time, that, and particularly messing around wasting time with anybody, non-white or white. They're not interested in replacing white supremacy with justice. I'm not going to be messing around and we're going to be hanging out for a whole 2 months and doing God knows what. Like, come on. I've heard other non-white people who pointed out the logic of that. Like, time is so critical. None of us knows even, how long we're going to be here, how much time you got. And so if you are saying, hey, Dr. Welsing inspired me and I want to help health of black people, Dikembe Mutombo inspired me, I'm going to go to med school like he did. I'm going to, try and see, learn what I can, use that to help other black people, as opposed to studying health, sciences, getting my books, being ready for class. I get hooked up. Other black people, what are y'all into? Watching TV, playing video games, smoking, crack cocaine or whatever drugs. You end up messing around with them. Now the whole medical thing, get to that later, maybe. Time and energy is so important. Mind even engaging your time and energy, as I said, with people who are not concerned with replacing white supremacy with justice. It's going to be limited. Doesn't mean you sit around and talk, call them names or talk bad about them. Not at all. But I'm not going to be just forking over all my time so we can sit and loaf on the sofa and watch TV and talk crazy, call names, go to every concert and have you do a whole lot of entertainment. Like, come on. We got far more important things to focus on under the system of that. Getting things together if a hurricane comes. Water. Lighting. Batteries. Generator. All kinds of goodies to check, especially if you have children. Like, oh man, especially if you have children. That cannot be overrated. Like, man, having, things together. We've talked about this. We planned, especially if you live in an area where they don't maybe have a lot of hurricanes or tornadoes, natural events, weather events, or maybe they don't have a history of those type of events. Hey, things change. That's even more of a reason, because like, oh man, if something happens here, people are really going to wig out because they don't really have any experience, at least in Florida and some places. Like, okay, they know they have hurricane season. Some people, they're more adept. They might even have supplies all ready to go. They've been through this. They know what to do, what not to do, that sort of thing. Those areas where they don't have these events, oh man, invest the time, do what you need to do. At minimum, getting a plan together. If we're leaving, great, get that plan together so we can leave and whatever precautions we need to take. If we're going to stay and hunker down, great, get that plan together, work on it, polish it up. We go out, talk about this, once every other month, once every 3 months, whatever you think, depending on the jurisdiction where you live. But, oh yeah, and even in the cold season, they have snowstorms and such. Power could go out then. I've had that where the power could be out for a week, a few days or such. If they have an ice storm or something of that nature. So, prep, save if you need documents, medication, definitely water. Definitely water. Can't stress that one enough. Get that water. Any hoodles, let's see. Other folks, they have commentary to share. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. See if any other folks, commentary, survival stories from the hurricane and such, or other commentary that they want to get in before we get ready to wrap things up. Again, we'll be back. Book Club. Andrea Blueen's My Country, Africa. We've read 3 sections, got into chapter 5. It has been, at least in my opinion, very informative read. I really didn't know a whole lot about the Congo and how white supremacy operated in that part of the world, but I have learned quite a bit, and we have not got that far. We have quite a bit more reading to go. We haven't even got to, the main part of all of this, which is the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and Andrea Blueen being right there, front row center for all of that. So more to come. Just got started. Hopefully we'll have some other supplementary material around this subject matter as well as we get deeper into the text. But My Country, Africa, Thursday. Just pay attention to updates on social media for other programs between now And this Thursday evening, as we get into autumn official October 2024. Let's see if other folks, if they have commentary to share, give their last minute or so. See if we got everybody's commentary for the weekend. Let's see. Grant. Make sure we didn't miss any of the folks. Seems like we got all of our callers and such. Said the book club will be on Thursday. Should have other updates about different programs. I'm trying to see if we can follow up with the whole minstrel show. I don't know if people got to hear Amy Godine, white woman suspected racist. She was with us this past Monday. Yes, top of the week. She was here. We were talking about New York State, the Adirondacks, and the minstrel shows in the area. See if we can follow up on that as we proceed. Just there's lots of other information about the minstrel shows and blackface in the Adirondacks specifically, with pictures. Wacky. I've even filed that in with white genetic annihilation. For sure. Any hoodles. Much obliged for folks tuning in, hopefully worthy of their time and energy. I feel like we mentioned a lot of different books this week. Man, everybody should have some reading project that they are working on. Something, nonfiction, something that is informative, constructive, new material, all the technology and nanotechnology and AI and everything else. Like, geez, there should be all kinds of goodies that people are reading and studying. Your offspring are reading and studying and sharing. Like, lots of that should be happening all the time, not just watching TV, man. Like, come on, dude, way better than said it. Dr. Welsing told us reading more important, watching screens, TV time for sure. Even get some outdoor time before it gets too cold and such. It's supposed to be sunny, at least here in the Wash or Seattle area over there tomorrow, rest of the weekend. Get out, get some air, get some exercise before it's all cold and winter and you gotta be stuck in the house and everything. Get out there, get some exercise, then you can come in and eat fresh fruits and veggies. Part of us taking great care of ourselves en route to replacing white supremacy with justice. We're headed to that whole time of year. Bad food and plenty of it. Candy and chocolate and Halloween and turkey and chicken and cakes and pies and cobblers. And they put all the alcohol because you can't have Thanksgiving parties and Halloween parties and Christmas parties. You got to have, eggnog that's been spiked, put some rum in it and all the rest of it. So, man, sobriety, healthy eating, emphasize that even when it's cold outside. Much obliged. Folks tuning in, sharing their thoughts, hopefully worthy of your Saturday evening. At minimum, we'll be here on Thursday. If not sooner, just check social media. We'll have updates, times, all that good stuff for future broadcasts. Let's see. Whew. No name calling black people. Black self-respect will help us solve this problem. Sobriety would be best. Now, they have all that talk in Canada. Non-white people, victims of racism, suffering from all those health problems. Same thing. At least Vancouver is not that far from us here in Seattle. Pretty close. They were talking about all those drug problems and grandmother hit her head. And they just assume she's on all the fentanyl and opioids and all that. Just man. Whole world is medical apartheid, but man, if that's what it's going to be, like even just a non-white person, I got a headache and you're going to assume I'm a crackhead? Yes, all of the non-white people, we are aggressively promote sobriety would be best. Always talking about being so. No, I don't want no shots. Nothing. I don't want no THC gummy bears. Nothing. Sober, sober, sober. And even then, they'll still say, he was snorting something. Yeah. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name-calling black people. No gossiping. No throwaway offspring. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.